For centuries, the story of our past has been told as a neat, orderly progression. We learned about the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the rise of great empires like Sumer and Egypt. It's a comfortable narrative of slow, steady progress, where humanity's greatest achievements, writing, math, engineering, arrived in a predictable sequence. But what if that comfortable timeline is wrong? What if, hidden beneath layers of academic dogma and forgotten earth, are objects, structures, and systems of knowledge that simply shouldn't exist? I'm not talking about minor puzzles. I'm talking about absolute enigmas, mysteries that have stubbornly resisted any consensus explanation for decades, even centuries. These are what we call chronological anomalies or genuinely unsolved mysteries. The key word here is unsolved. Unlike the pyramids, where we might argue about how they were built, these artifacts lack even a basic, agreed-upon function, translation, or identity. They are physical evidence of intellectual black holes in our history. They force us to ask dangerous questions. Could an entire complex civilization like the Inka manage a sophisticated administrative and literary system using only knotted strings, the reading of which is now entirely lost? Why would the Romans, meticulous record keepers, scatter hundreds of geometrically perfect bronze objects across Europe without ever writing down what they were for? These anomalies aren't just footnotes. They're gaping holes in our story, suggesting we're missing entire chapters of human intellectual history. Often the resistance to exploring these mysteries comes from within academia itself. To accept that something like the Phaistos disc, a clay disc from the Bronze Age created with movable type printing centuries before Gutenberg, is real, isn't just a minor update. It's a paradigm shift. It means rewriting textbooks, challenging established expertise, and fundamentally altering our understanding of ancient technology. When scholars can't agree on a single, plausible explanation, an artifact is often labeled a ritualistic object and shelved. But we're going to focus on the evidence they can't shelve, the persistent, frustrating, and scientifically verified facts that defy any easy answer. Perhaps the greatest secrets of all are locked away in lost languages and codes. Imagine a culture that achieves monumental feats of engineering, navigation, and art, yet their written record is completely inaccessible to us. On Easter Island, the remnants of the once mighty Rapa Nui civilization include the Rongorongo script, beautifully carved wooden tablets containing unique symbols that document their culture. Despite countless attempts by the world's best minds, this script remains undeciphered. Similarly, the Indus Valley script, the language of a super civilization that spanned 1 million square kilometers, is still silent. To lose a language is to lose a library, a philosophy, and the entire scientific record of a people. These undeciphered scripts are literal lockboxes on history, holding knowledge we can only guess at. Then there are mysteries so profound because the cultures that created them left no instructions. The Roman Dodecahedrons are a perfect example of this total absence of context. Found across what was once Gallo-Roman territory, these are hollow bronze objects with 12 flat pentagonal faces, each with a circular hole and small knobs on the corners. For centuries, scholars have proposed functions. Are they candlesticks, measuring tools for water pipes, knitting aids, or maybe a tool for predicting the optimal time to sow winter grain? Not a single one of these theories is supported by any Roman writing, drawings, or records. This complete vacuum of information elevates the dodecahedron from a simple artifact to an outright historical riddle. But these unsolved mysteries aren't just ancient relics. Sometimes the most frustrating codes are surprisingly modern. Take the Taman Shud case, also known as the mystery of the Somerton man. In 1948, a man was found deceased on a beach in Adelaide, Australia, completely unidentified. The mystery deepened when investigators found a hidden pocket containing a tiny slip of paper bearing the phrase Taman Shud, Persian for finished or ended. This clue led them to a book, and inside that book, a coded note. The code, just 5 lines of apparently random letters, has resisted every attempt at decryption by military and civilian cryptographers. Who was he, and what did his final cryptic message mean? To this day, both his identity and the code remain one of the most stubborn, unsolved modern ciphers in the world. Another category of absolute mystery is the treasure map that has never been tested. Among the famous Dead Sea Scrolls, almost all of which contain religious texts, one stands completely alone: the Copper Scroll. Instead of spiritual teachings, this scroll, engraved on thin sheets of copper, details a list of 64 separate caches of gold, silver, and precious metals. It reads like a treasure map, giving specific but frustratingly vague instructions for their recovery, like in the funeral parlor's cistern in the dry wall, 11 talents of silver. The problem is that the geographical markers and place names are long obsolete. Due to the incredible value and the sheer difficulty of verifying the locations without massive, destructive excavation, the treasures listed in the Copper Scroll remain unfound and unconfirmed. It's the ultimate historical scavenger hunt, but one that has yet to be completed. Then there are colossal mysteries that revolve around identity. The Olmec civilization, considered the mother culture of Mesoamerica, carved massive, detailed heads out of single basalt boulders. Some stand nearly 9 feet tall and weigh up to 50 tons. These are clearly portraits of powerful rulers or perhaps revered ball players, but their specific identities are unknown, as the Olmec writing system is another one that has yet to be fully deciphered. The mystery is amplified by the journey of the stones themselves. The basalt rock sources for these monuments were often 40 to 90 miles away. How did this pre-wheel, pre-draft animal culture transport 50-ton blocks of stone across rugged terrain, rivers, and swamps? The technology required for such a feat remains a complete mystery. Let's travel even further back, to the dawn of literature. The Kesh Temple hymn is arguably the oldest piece of literature in the world, dating back over 4,600 years to the Sumerian civilization. While the text has been successfully translated, the mystery lies in its function and influence. The text claims the temple it describes was established by Enlil himself, the chief Mesopotamian wind god. How was this powerful, complex piece of literature preserved and transmitted across millennia? And does its mythological origin story contain any sliver of a forgotten, actual historical event? It raises profound questions about the very beginnings of human storytelling and belief. Our journey will take us across the globe, focusing only on these true enigmas. We will examine the medieval Voynich Manuscript, a 240-page illustrated book written in an unknown script, depicting plants that don't exist and astronomical charts that don't align with our heavens. It has resisted every cryptographer and linguist since its modern discovery. We will look at the Khipus, the three-dimensional knotted language of the Inka, which we know records history, but cannot read. We are about to pull on threads that might unravel the entire historical tapestry we thought we knew. Prepare yourself for the evidence that suggests we do not know our own story. The time has come to explore the genuinely unsolved knowledge of our past. In 1908, on the sun-baked island of Crete, a discovery was made that would baffle the world for over a century. An Italian archaeologist named Luigi Pernier was excavating the ancient Minoan palace of Phaistos. He was uncovering a forgotten civilization, a Bronze Age superpower that predated the classical Greeks, known for their stunning palaces and powerful navy. The Minoans left behind writing systems like Linear B, an early form of Greek that we eventually cracked. But they also left Linear A, which to this day remains a mystery. Deep within a basement storage pit, Pernier found something that fit into no category at all. It was a simple, circular piece of baked clay, about 6 inches across. This was the Phaistos disc. Found alongside a Minoan jar and a Linear A tablet, it was clear this artifact belonged to the Middle or Late Bronze Age, somewhere around 1700 BC. But what it was, that was the question. Get ready for this because it's a mind-bender. The Phaistos disc isn't written on, it's stamped. It has 241 impressions made from 45 different unique stamps. Think about that for a second. That's movable type printing. This is a technology that wasn't supposed to be invented in the West until Johannes Gutenberg, over 3,000 years later. This single object suggests the Minoans might have had a rudimentary printing press. The symbols are arranged in a spiral, winding from the edge to the center on both sides. We see a man's head with a plumed helmet, a shield, a running man, a cat, a fish, all beautifully detailed. But this creates a huge paradox. Why would someone create this complex, labor-intensive stamping system for just one single document? If they had this technology, where are all the other printed texts? Let's take a closer look. The disc has text on both sides, which we call side A and side B. The text is neatly divided into 61 distinct words by tiny vertical lines. Small marks suggest the scribe worked from the outside in, following the spiral. But what language is it? The symbols look a bit like other Cretan hieroglyphs, but there's no direct match. Not a single one of the 45 symbols conclusively lines up with any known letter or syllable from any other script in the ancient world. This means we're looking at either a language completely unique to Phaistos or a cipher using pictorial symbols. If it's a language, it's a dead end. This disc is the only example we have. Whenever something this unique and groundbreaking appears, you have to ask, is it real? For a while, some critics argued it was a brilliant forgery, created by its discoverer, Luigi Pernier, to make a name for himself. The arguments were plausible. It was found in a humble pit, not some grand royal chamber, and the script is completely isolated. But science came to the rescue. Independent tests on the clay's mineral content and the microscopic details of the firing process confirmed it. The disc was made from local Cretan clay and baked in a Minoan kiln during the correct time period. The consensus is clear. The Phaistos disc is authentic. And that just makes the mystery even deeper. So, if it's real, what is it? One of the leading theories is that it's a sacred text, a hymn, or a religious chant. This idea comes from the repetitive nature of certain symbol groups. It looks a lot like the formulaic language you find in prayers or rituals. The most common symbol, that plumed head or warrior, might represent a god, a king, or a high priest. Some researchers believe it could be a hymn to a Minoan earth goddess tied to their rituals about fertility and the cycles of nature. This would explain why it's a one-of-a-kind object. It wasn't a common document, but a special ritual offering meant for a single, sacred purpose. But what if it's not religious at all? Another compelling theory treats the disc as a sophisticated astronomical calculator or a calendar. The circular spiral design is perfect for tracking cycles. Think of it like a perpetual calendar. One detailed interpretation argues it's a lunar-solar calendar with segments representing days or months and the symbols marking key events like solstices and equinoxes. This makes sense, as many Bronze Age cultures were obsessed with tracking the stars. If this is true, the disc isn't a text, but a tool, an incredible piece of ancient science that puts the Minoans way ahead of their time. Then there's the foreign intruder theory. What if the disc wasn't even made in Crete? Some symbols, especially that plumed head, look very similar to art from ancient Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. This theory suggests the disc was a foreign import, brought to Phaistos by a trader or a diplomat. The text might be written in Luwian, an ancient Anatolian language, but stamped using a unique set of tools created by the Minoans. Perhaps they were using it as a template for a diplomatic message. This would explain why the printing technology was so localized. It was created for a very specific, cross-cultural purpose and never used again. Ultimately, the biggest obstacle to solving this mystery is simple. We don't have enough data. To crack a code, linguists need a large amount of text to find patterns, grammar, and word frequencies. For Egyptian hieroglyphs or Sumerian cuneiform, we have thousands of examples. For the Phaistos disc, we have one, a single small object with just 241 symbols. It's like trying to learn the entire English language from a single business card. Without more examples of this script, or a Rosetta Stone to help translate, every theory is just speculation. It's a linguistic island, completely cut off from the rest of the ancient world. Of course, that hasn't stopped people from trying. Over the last century, dozens of scholars and amateurs have boldly claimed they've solved it. The problem? Their solutions are all completely different and mutually exclusive. One scholar claimed it's early Greek. A computer scientist said it's Sumerian. Others have argued for Anatolian, Semitic, and even Basque origins. Each solution starts by assuming what the symbols mean, and then tries to force-fit them to a known language. But since the text is so short, none of these claims can be proven. The fact that there are so many rival translations proves just one thing. Nobody has actually solved it. The Phaistos disc remains a perfect, beautiful enigma. It's a piece of pre-Gutenberg printing technology, a text in an unknown language, and a puzzle that has stumped the brightest minds for over 100 years. It's a literal snapshot of lost knowledge, a message from the Bronze Age that we still can't hear. Whether it's a hymn, a calendar, or a diplomatic letter, we may never know for sure. Until another disc is unearthed from the Cretan soil, this ancient code will continue to hold its secrets, a silent testament to a civilization that was far more advanced than we ever imagined. Our journey into the utterly unknown stays right here, in the heart of the Bronze Age Aegean. We've seen the linguistic puzzle of the Phaistos disk. Now we turn to the vast, enduring mystery left behind by the same brilliant culture, the Minoans. For over 1,000 years, from around 2700 BC, the Minoans were the masters of the sea. They built a trading empire that connected Egypt to the Black Sea. Their palaces, like the legendary Knossos, were centers of incredible wealth, stunning art, and complex administration. They created Europe's first truly advanced society, but their greatest legacy is a wall of silence. Their main administrative script, Linear A, remains completely undeciphered. The Minoans actually used 3 different scripts. First came Cretan hieroglyphics, which were largely pictorial. Around 1800 BC, this evolved into Linear A, an elegant flowing script used for palace records and religious offerings. Then, after the Minoan civilization collapsed and the Mycenaean Greeks took over, Linear B appeared. The cracking of Linear B in 1952 by Michael Ventris was one of the greatest code-breaking achievements of the 20th century. He proved it was an early form of Greek, but this incredible breakthrough only made the Linear A mystery deeper. The 2 scripts look similar, sharing many signs, but Ventris's discovery confirmed that the language of Linear A was not Greek. It belongs to a completely unknown language, forever locking away the true voice of the Minoan people. We have far more examples of Linear A than the single Phaistos disk, about 1,500 inscriptions in total. Most of these are short clay tablets, basically administrative records from palaces like Hagia Triada. They are mostly lists, inventories of goods, people, animals, and agricultural produce. Luckily, the numbering system in Linear A is similar to Linear B, so we can read the quantities. We know that, say, 10 jars of olives went to a certain palace, but the words that go with those numbers, the commodities, people's names, place names, the verbs, remain complete gibberish to us. A smaller but equally important set of inscriptions is found on religious objects like stone libation tables and gold rings. But these texts are often very formulaic and don't offer any better clues to the language. Linguists have figured out that Linear A is a syllabary. This means each of its 80 or so core signs represents a syllable, usually a vowel or a consonant-vowel combo like DA or KO. We can even apply the phonetic values from the solved Linear B script to Linear A signs that look the same. This method is called the Ventris grid. But here's where the problem kicks in. When you apply those Greek phonetic sounds to the words of Linear A, the resulting strings of syllables don't form a recognizable word in any known language family, whether it's Indo-European or Semitic. The language is a complete isolate, totally unique to the ancient Mediterranean. The real challenge of Linear A is that its fundamental grammar and structure do not match any language we can trace. Scholars have thrown out theories suggesting it could be related to Luwian, Etruscan, or even Basque. But none of these theories can explain the unique grammatical features we see in the Minoan texts. For instance, some common word endings in Minoan are completely different from anything in contemporary Greek or Hittite. The Minoan language, whatever it was, seems to have vanished from the earth, leaving no linguistic descendants. This makes Linear A a linguistic black hole. We can see the light of a literate civilization, but we can't get close enough to understand its source. One of the most tantalizing clues involves what we think are personal names. In many lists, certain words appear next to clear pictures of men or women. This has allowed scholars to categorize them. It seems that words for female names have distinct suffixes or endings that are different from the male names. Scholars have tried to use these gender distinctions to figure out the grammar, but even with these clues, no clear system has emerged. What did these unique suffixes mean? Were they plurals or markers for possession or something else entirely? We just don't know. Our failure to even understand their names shows just how stuck we are. The religious inscriptions, while short, contain a handful of repeated words that must have been central to the Minoan faith. The most famous is the sequence A Sa Sa Ra Mi, found on several libation vessels and altars. Many scholars believe this is the name of a major Minoan goddess, or a primary religious title, maybe an early version of the Greek goddess Rhea or Demeter. If we could just translate A Sa Sa Ra Mi, we might unlock the entire Minoan pantheon. But when we apply the Ventris grid to the syllables and try to match it to any known religious name in the ancient world, we come up empty. The spiritual heart of the Minoan world is as sealed off as their economic records. The only thing that could truly crack Linear A is the discovery of a bilingual inscription, a Minoan Rosetta Stone. If archaeologists found a treaty between the Minoans and, say, Egypt, written in both Linear A and Egyptian hieroglyphs, the system could be decoded almost overnight. Despite decades of intense searching in Crete, Egypt, and Turkey, no such bilingual text has ever been found. This means all decoding attempts have to rely on internal analysis, just guessing the function of words based on their position and how often they appear. This method has failed for over 70 years, cementing the script's status as unsolved. So why does this matter so much? Why is the failure to decode Linear A so significant? Because we are locked out of the Minoan mind. We know the later Mycenaeans used their script, Linear B, mostly for palace bookkeeping. But what did the Minoans write? Did they compose literature, poetry, or epic histories? Did they record sophisticated scientific observations about navigation or astronomy? Did they document the rituals and philosophies of their unique, goddess-centered religion? Without a translation, all we have is the shell of their society, the beautiful art and the impressive ruins. The intellectual and spiritual core of Europe's first great civilization remains silent, a vast archive of forbidden knowledge, resting on thousands of unreadable clay tablets. Linear A isn't just an academic puzzle, it's a profound historical tragedy. The Minoans dominated the Aegean for over a millennium before they vanished. Their civilization was literate, wealthy, and powerful, but its true history, its triumphs, its politics, and the story of its final catastrophic collapse are all recorded in a language that may never speak again. We leave the Bronze Age and jump forward 2 millennia to the height of the Roman Empire, a civilization defined by its meticulous record-keeping, engineering feats, and expansive bureaucracy. For a culture that documented everything from military campaigns to laundry lists, one artifact stands out for its complete and total absence from the historical record: the Roman Dodecahedron. These objects are a genuine, undisputed enigma. Hundreds have been found across the Roman Empire, predominantly in the northwestern provinces of Gaul and Britannia, dating from the 2nd to 4th centuries AD. Their existence is proven. Their function is completely unknown. What is a Roman dodecahedron? It's a hollow object, usually cast from bronze, and it's defined by its unique geometry, 12 flat, 5-sided faces. That's where the name Dodecahedron comes from. But the weird part is, each of these 12 faces has a perfectly circular hole in it, and the sizes of these holes aren't uniform. They vary from face to face, even on the same object. To top it off, little decorative knobs stick out from each of its 20 corners. They range in size from about 4 centimeters to 11 centimeters, so from about the size of a golf ball to a baseball. Every detail, the precise geometry, the different hole sizes, the knobs, feels like it had to be functional or at least significant. But the Romans, who catalogued their spoons and sandals, left not a single written word or drawing of this object. This silence is the core of the mystery, and the puzzle only gets deeper when you look at where they're found. These objects appear almost exclusively in the northwestern fringes of the empire, in Roman villas, markets, and even storage pits in modern-day France, Germany, and Great Britain. But they are virtually absent from Italy, Greece, and North Africa, the very heart of the Roman world, its intellectual and cultural centers. This strange distribution suggests they were either a local, provincial tool, or maybe a ritual object important only to those on the frontier. Perhaps they belonged to a secret society that stayed confined to the Celtic-influenced military provinces. If it was a standard Roman tool, why aren't they found in Rome itself? If it was a Celtic invention, why are they made with sophisticated Roman bronze casting techniques? We just can't square the geography with the materials. So what are the theories? Well, the most persistent and compelling idea is that the dodecahedron was some kind of astronomical measuring device. Proponents argue that the different-sized holes could have been used to sight constellations, or even determine the angle of the sun on a specific day. One popular version of this theory suggests it was used to find the optimal date for sowing winter grain, a crucial task for any agricultural society. By sighting the sun through the holes, a farmer could determine when the winter solstice was approaching. A Dutch researcher even tried to prove this, arguing that the different hole diameters worked at specific latitudes. But there are a couple of big problems with this idea. First, the dodecahedrons are found across such a wide geographic range that a single calibrated device wouldn't work everywhere. And second, the objects aren't made with consistent scientific precision. It's an elegant theory, but it remains unproven. All right, if not for farming, what about for fighting? Another practical theory is that it was a military or engineering tool. The Romans were obsessed with logistics and precision. Could it have been a rangefinder to calculate the distance to an enemy target? Or maybe a calibration tool for standardizing the diameter of water pipes? That last idea gained some traction because the Romans strictly regulated water flow using lead pipes called fistulae. However, we've actually found Roman pipe calibration tools, and they look nothing like a dodecahedron. Plus, these objects are often found in domestic settings or even near temples, not just in military camps. This really undermines the idea that they were standard-issue legionary gear. With no clear practical function, we arrive at the theory that is often the last stop for mysterious artifacts. It must have been a religious or ritual object. In both Celtic and Roman spiritual life, numbers and geometry held symbolic power. As a geometrically perfect solid, the dodecahedron could have been used in divination, fortune-telling, or prophecy. Maybe the knobs were used to hold candles or incense during a ceremony, This theory gets a boost from the fact that many of these objects are found near temples or in burial sites. But here's the catch. Calling something ritualistic is often just a polite way of saying, we have no idea what it was used for. By its very nature, this theory is almost impossible to prove, since ritual objects get their meaning from unwritten beliefs that leave no trace for archaeologists to find. Now, for a theory that came from a completely unexpected place. Some modern enthusiasts have suggested the dodecahedron was actually a simple knitting tool, specifically for making the fingers of gloves. They argue that the knobs could be used to hold loops of yarn, much like a modern knitting dolly. And people have tested this. You actually can use a 3D printed replica to knit a small tube of fabric. The larger holes might be useful for starting the project, but this theory has its own holes. Knitting wasn't unknown in the Roman world, so if such a useful and specific tool existed, it's almost inconceivable that it wouldn't have been mentioned or drawn somewhere. More importantly, this doesn't explain the varying hole sizes, which seem to serve no purpose at all in knitting. While it's a fascinating and creative idea, the evidence is pretty circumstantial. This brings us to a more shadowy possibility. Given the dodecahedron's unique distribution in the provinces, its total lack of documentation, and its consistent, complex design, a really compelling theory is that it was a symbol or tool for a secret society. The Roman Empire was filled with mystery cults, like the cult of Mithras, and professional guilds that used secret signs and handshakes. Perhaps the dodecahedron was a kind of membership token, a key to a special lock, or a standardized signal to recognize fellow members. The different-sized holes could be used to fit onto a specific pin, proving a person's identity or rank within the group. Of course, like all secret society theories, this one is tantalizingly unsolvable. The entire point of a secret society is to leave no paper trail. The true mark of an unsolved mystery is our inability to replicate its function. If the dodecahedron were a measuring tool, modern engineers should be able to reverse engineer it and prove its purpose conclusively. If it was a military device, historians should be able to place it within a known military context. Yet after centuries of speculation and countless modern attempts to use these objects for astronomy, surveying, and crafting, no single verifiable function has ever been demonstrated. Its very existence points to an entire concept, a tool, or a ritual that was so localized or so secret that it completely bypassed the vast written record of the Roman world. So, the Roman dodecahedron stands as one of history's most profound question marks. It is a mass-produced, geometrically complex artifact from one of the most documented societies in history. Yet we cannot explain why they made it, who used it, or what it was for. This wasn't some primitive, crudely made item. It's a product of sophisticated metalwork that demanded a clear, intentional purpose. And that purpose, despite all our modern knowledge and technology, remains completely, stubbornly unsolved. What do you think it was used for? We now turn from mysterious objects to perhaps the greatest missing treasure in all of archaeology, the tomb of Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony. As the last queen of Egypt, Cleopatra, alongside her Roman lover Antony, marks the end of one era and the dramatic birth of another, the Roman Empire. Their joint suicide in 30 BC was a moment of immense historical significance, recorded in detail by historians like Plutarch. And yet, despite their fame, power, and the sheer historical weight of their story, their final resting place is one of history's most persistent and tantalizing unsolved mysteries. We know the basics from ancient accounts. After Antony's death and Cleopatra's capture by Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, she was held under arrest. Octavian planned to parade her through Rome in chains, a symbol of his ultimate victory. But Cleopatra outsmarted him. Following her own dramatic suicide, Octavian, perhaps moved by a strange sense of respect or pity, gave her a royal burial. Plutarch tells us she was buried by Octavian with splendid and regal honors beside Antony. This single sentence confirms it. A joint, lavish tomb exists, somewhere in or near the ancient city of Alexandria. It has to be spectacular. Cleopatra's main reason for taking her own life was to avoid the ultimate humiliation of a Roman triumph. She was meticulous, even in her final moments. It's likely she prearranged the details of her burial, making a final plea to Octavian for a dignified resting place with Antony. But was Octavian's motive to honor her or to make a public statement? He could have built a grand public mausoleum to symbolize Rome's power, or he could have granted her a secret hidden tomb, ensuring it would never be defiled. This ambiguity is key. We don't know if we're looking for a massive monument or a deliberately hidden chamber. The most obvious theory places the tomb right in the heart of ancient Alexandria, within the Ptolemaic royal quarter. This area, which once housed palaces and the legendary library, was the center of power. There's just one massive problem. For centuries, earthquakes, tsunamis, and rising sea levels have battered the coastline. The entire royal quarter is now underwater, buried beneath meters of silt in a busy modern harbor. If the tomb is there, finding it would require a revolution in underwater archaeology. For now, it remains tantalizingly out of reach beneath the waves. This brings us to the most high-profile search of the modern era, a site called Taposiris Magna, about 45 kilometers west of Alexandria. Since 2004, archaeologist Dr. Kathleen Martinez has passionately pursued the theory that Cleopatra chose this location herself. The temple here is dedicated to Osiris and Isis, the divine couple of Egyptian mythology. Cleopatra, who saw herself as the reincarnation of Isis, would have seen a powerful parallel in being buried here with her Antony, her Osiris. Excavations have uncovered incredible clues: deep shafts, burial chambers fit for royalty, a vast network of tunnels, and even coins bearing Cleopatra's face. The evidence is compelling, but the final proof, a sarcophagus or an inscription, remains elusive. The dig continues, but the mystery is far from solved. Another layer of complexity is the dual nature of the burial itself. Antony was a Roman. His body would likely have been cremated, his ashes placed in an urn. Cleopatra, on the other hand, was an Egyptian pharaoh. She would have been mummified in the ancient tradition of her ancestors. So what did a regal burial for both of them look like? Was it a single grand tomb housing both an urn and a sarcophagus, or were there two separate burial styles within the same complex? Archaeologists have to look for evidence of both Roman and Egyptian customs side by side, making the search that much harder. We also can't underestimate the sheer destructive power of nature. Alexandria sits on a geological fault line. Massive earthquakes, especially one in 365 AD that triggered a devastating tsunami, leveled huge parts of the ancient city. Even if the tomb survived inland, it would have likely been damaged, collapsed, or buried deep underground. Over 2,000 years, any visible monument would have been a prime target for tomb robbers, stripped of its gold and precious decorations. What remains today might not be a pristine chamber, but a flooded, collapsed ruin, making it almost impossible to identify. And then there's the silence. Unlike the tomb of Alexander the Great, which Roman emperors visited for centuries, Cleopatra and Antony's tomb seems to vanish from the historical record almost immediately after it was built. No later Roman or Egyptian writer mentions its location. Was this intentional? Did Octavian suppress the location to prevent it from becoming a shrine for anti-Roman rebels? Or did Cleopatra's own loyalists keep it a secret to protect it? This deafening silence suggests a deliberate effort to make the tomb disappear from history, ensuring it would never be found. Make no mistake, finding this tomb would be the single greatest archaeological discovery of our lifetime. A regal burial from this period would contain a priceless fusion of late Egyptian and early Roman art and treasure. More importantly, it could hold final texts or writings from Cleopatra herself, giving us her perspective on the fall of her kingdom, a voice completely missing from the Roman-centric history we know today. The historical knowledge locked away inside that lost chamber is almost unimaginable. And so the search goes on. We know the tomb exists. We know it was magnificent, but a combination of deliberate secrecy, geological chaos, and the simple passage of 2 millennia has kept its location hidden. Every year, new technologies in sonar and ground-penetrating radar are deployed at Taposiris Magna and off the coast of Alexandria, inching us closer to an answer. But until a sarcophagus bearing the name of the last Queen of Egypt is finally uncovered, her ultimate fate remains one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Our journey into the world's greatest unsolved mysteries now takes us east, to a civilization that was, quite frankly, a giant of the ancient world. Forget what you think you know about ancient empires. The Indus Valley Civilization, or IVC, was the largest of them all, dwarfing both ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Flourishing from around 3300 BC, this culture sprawled across 1 million square kilometers of modern-day India and Pakistan. They built incredible cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, featuring sophisticated street grids, advanced sanitation systems, public baths, and standardized weights and measures. This level of urban planning wasn't seen again until the Roman Empire, thousands of years later. Yet for all its size and sophistication, this entire civilization is silent. The only voice they left behind is the Indus Valley script, a cryptic sequence of symbols that has resisted every attempt at translation, leaving one of history's greatest superpowers completely mute. So, what does this script even look like? The vast majority of it is found on small square seals made of soapstone and on clay tablets. Over 4,000 of these have been unearthed. But here's the catch. The inscriptions are incredibly short. We're talking 3 to 5 symbols on average. The longest one ever found has only 26 signs. Think about that. These seals were probably used like administrative stamps for trade, maybe marking ownership on bundles of goods. But this brevity is the single biggest roadblock to deciphering them. Without long texts, like epic poems, royal decrees, or religious myths, linguists can't figure out the grammar, where words begin and end, or how often certain signs appear. It's like trying to learn English by only reading company logos. Before you can translate a script, you have to know which way to read it. Simple, right? Not with the Indus script. For the most part, it seems to run from right to left. We can guess this because the symbols on the right are usually neat and well spaced, while the ones on the left look cramped as if the scribe was running out of room. But then you find a few examples that seem to go from left to right. And some of the longer texts appear to use a boustrophodon pattern, which means the direction switches with each new line, like an ox ploughing a field. This inconsistency, while not a complete deal-breaker, adds another layer of complexity to an already baffling puzzle. It makes it even harder to define word boundaries and figure out the grammatical structure. But the biggest, most fundamental question is this: is the Indus script even a language? The number of unique symbols is the key here. An alphabet like ours has about 20 to 40 signs representing sounds. A syllabary, where signs represent syllables, usually has 80 to 100. The Indus script. It has between 400 and 600 unique symbols. This huge number suggests it might be a logo-syllabic system, where some signs are whole words or ideas, mixed with signs for syllables. However, a few researchers like Steve Farmer have argued that it's not a language at all. They suggest it's just a complex system of religious or clan symbols with no link to spoken words. Most archaeologists disagree, but without definitive proof, the debate rages on. Okay, let's assume it is a language. What language is it? There are two main theories, and they're in direct opposition. The first is the Dravidian theory. It suggests the script represents an ancestor of modern Dravidian languages, like Tamil, which are now spoken mostly in South India. The idea is that the Indus people were Dravidian speakers who were later pushed south by migrating groups. The competing theory is the Indo-Aryan theory. This one links the script to the Vedic culture that came later, arguing that it's an early form of Sanskrit. Unfortunately, both theories are stuck. The reason? We don't have a Rosetta Stone for the Indus script, a bilingual text that shows the same passage in a known language. Until we find one, the Indus language is like a child with two competing parents, and we have no DNA test to prove who's right. You'd think in our digital age, with supercomputers and AI, we'd have cracked this by now. And we've certainly tried. For the past 2 decades, researchers have thrown everything they have at it. Sophisticated Markov models, computational linguistics, you name it, hoping to find hidden grammar or word order. One team, led by Rajesh Rao, used computer analysis to show that the script does have the complex patterns of a real language, which was a big blow to the "it's not a language" theory. But here's the limit of technology. Computers can identify patterns, but they can't magically supply the sounds or meanings of the symbols. The machine has basically confirmed there's a deep logical structure here, but it hasn't broken the code. It's only proven that the inscriptions are too short and too isolated to be solved by number crunching alone. The mystery doesn't stop with the script. The images on the seals are just as baffling. The most common animal appearing on nearly 2/3 of all seals is the so-called unicorn, a bull-like creature shown with a single horn. Was it a real animal that went extinct, A mythical beast? A symbol for a powerful clan? We have no idea. And then there's the famous Pashupati seal. It shows a figure sitting in what looks like a yoga pose, wearing a horned headdress and surrounded by animals. Many believe this could be an early version of the Hindu god Shiva, whose title is Pashupati, or Lord of Animals. If we could read the script next to it, we could confirm a direct link between the Indus religion and modern Hinduism. That would completely rewrite our understanding of religion in South Asia. For now, it remains a tantalizing, unsolved mystery. Adding another layer to this puzzle is the civilization's connection to a legendary lost river. The ancient Vedic texts of India speak of a mighty river called the Saraswati. For a long time, people thought it was a myth, but recent geological research has confirmed it was real. We can now trace the course of the Ghaggar Hakra, a massive, now dry river system that once flowed parallel to the Indus and sustained many of the major Indus cities. The collapse of this civilization around 1900 BC lines up perfectly with the gradual drying up of this river caused by climate change and shifting tectonic plates. If we could only read their script, it would almost certainly contain their own account of this environmental catastrophe, their records of the drying rivers, their desperate attempts to survive, and their spiritual beliefs about what was happening. We are missing the first-hand story of how a super-civilization vanished. The silence of the Indus script means we are left wandering through ghost cities. We have no names for the rulers of Harappa or Mohenjo-daro. We don't know what their political system was, though it seems remarkably egalitarian, with no grand palaces or royal tombs like in Egypt. We have no records of their wars, their treaties, or their beliefs. Their writing is mostly confined to those tiny administrative seals, giving us just the barest glimpse of a highly organized, trade-based society. We can walk their streets, admire their advanced sewage systems, and study their art, but we cannot hear their voices. They are a civilization that is geographically immense but historically mute. In the end, the Indus Valley script remains one of the world's great cryptographic puzzles. Its extreme brevity, the huge number of symbols, and the total lack of a bilingual key make it arguably harder to crack than any other major Bronze Age script. To solve it would be to unlock the history of a lost super-civilization, to understand the deep roots of religion in South Asia, and to fill in one of the largest blank spots on the map of ancient history. Yet, after nearly a century of effort, the code of the Indus Valley remains entirely frustratingly unsolved. From the monumental civilizations of the ancient world, we now journey to one of its most isolated, Easter Island, known to its inhabitants as Rapa Nui. This tiny speck of volcanic rock in the vast Pacific, over 2,000 miles from the nearest continent, was home to one of humanity's most remarkable cultures. The Rapa Nui people are, of course, famous for carving the colossal Moai statues, a feat of engineering that still sparks debate today. But their most enduring and genuinely unsolved mystery is a series of intricate glyphs known as the Rongorongo script. Carved onto wooden tablets, this unique system is the only true writing system ever to have evolved in the entire Pacific region, a lone intellectual island in a sea of oral traditions. The world first learned of the script in 1864, when a French missionary, Brother Eugène Hérode, reported seeing numerous inscribed tablets used by the islanders. But his discovery came too late. By then, Rapa Nui society was in a state of catastrophic collapse, ravaged by internal conflicts, devastating slave raids, and foreign diseases. Missionaries, fearing the tablets were connected to pagan beliefs, tragically encouraged the islanders to destroy them. Today, a mere 27 complete or partial tablets survive, scattered in museums across the globe. This extreme scarcity is the single greatest obstacle to deciphering them. Much like the Phaistos disc, we are left with a tiny, fragmented body of text from a culture whose language and traditions were already fading when the script was first recorded. What makes Rongorongo so fascinating isn't just its isolation, but its completely baffling reading direction, a method known as reverse boustrophedon. Imagine this. You start reading at the bottom left corner of a tablet, moving from left to right. But when you reach the end of the line, you don't just drop down to the next one. Instead, you have to physically flip the entire tablet 180 degrees. The line that was above is now the new bottom line, and you read it again, from left to right. You repeat this constant flipping for every single line. No other writing system in the history of the world demands that the reader constantly rotate the writing surface. This bizarre, almost ritualistic structure suggests the act of reading or chanting was just as important as the text itself. The script itself is composed of about 400 to 600 distinct glyphs, suggesting it's a logo-syllabic system, much like the Indus script. The glyphs are beautifully pictorial, depicting things we can easily recognize, different species of birds, human figures in various poses, fish and canoes. This visual nature is both a blessing and a curse for linguists. It helps us guess the potential meaning of a word. A bird glyph might simply mean bird, but it gives us no clue about the sound of that word in the Rapa Nui language. We can infer that a sequence of signs might represent a chant, a genealogy, or a creation myth. But without a confirmed phonetic key, any translation remains pure speculation. There has been one glimmer of a breakthrough, though it remains highly controversial. In the 1950s, a team of researchers proposed that a small portion of one tablet contains a lunar calendar. They identified repeated sequences of glyphs that corresponded perfectly with the 28-day lunar cycle. This suggests that at least some of the tablets might contain astronomical or calendrical information rather than purely linguistic text. However, this success has been isolated. Applying these same calendrical rules to the rest of the script has yielded nothing, failing to unlock the wider language. It was a fascinating discovery, but it didn't provide the master key. This leads to the most fundamental debate, one that also plagues the Indus script. Is Rongorongo a true writing system, or is it just a complex mnemonic aid? A mnemonic device uses symbols not to be read, but to jog the memory of an orator who has already memorized a long chant or a detailed genealogy. The Rapa Nui people had a powerful tradition of oral history passed down through generations. Some scholars argue that the tablets were never meant to be read in the modern sense. Instead, they were sacred ritual objects used by a special class of priests to ensure the perfect recitation of sacred texts. If this theory is correct, that the script is a highly personalized memory aid, then it might be fundamentally unsolvable by traditional linguistic methods. The mystery deepens when we look at the historical accounts. When missionaries finally realized the importance of the tablets in the 1860s and tried to find someone who could read them, they were met with confusion. They found only a handful of elders who claimed to have some ability, but their attempts to read the tablets produced wildly different stories and chants for the same text. This could mean the mnemonic aid theory is correct, or it could mean that the last generation of scribes had already lost the true knowledge. One man famously recited a creation myth from a tablet, but his reading has never been independently verified. The chance to speak with someone truly fluent in Rongorongo vanished with the last generation of the old Rapa Nui, locking their knowledge away forever. The linguistic isolation of the script is another major hurdle. The Rapa Nui language itself is part of the Polynesian family, related to Hawaiian and Marquesan. But the Rongorongo script has no known relatives. It appears to have no connection to any other writing system on Earth. Did the Rapa Nui invent it entirely on their own after they settled the island? Or did they bring the idea of writing with them from some unknown origin? This total isolation makes it impossible to use comparative linguistics, a key tool that helped crack codes like Linear B. Cryptographers are forced to start completely from scratch. Ultimately, the sheer number of tablets that were lost is a tragedy that likely seals the script's fate. If hundreds of tablets existed today, decipherment would be a real possibility. With more text, patterns would emerge, and statistical analysis could work its magic. But with only 27 broken fragments, the chances of success are heartbreakingly slim. These few remaining pieces of wood likely hold the answers to so many questions. Crucial details about the collapse of Rapa Nui society, the ecological catastrophe that led to their deforestation, the true meaning of the Moai, and the powerful oral traditions of their religion. All of this history, resting on a few pieces of driftwood, holding a code that we cannot seem to crack. The Rongorongo script is the silent voice of the Rapa Nui people. We can see their technological mastery in the stone faces of the Moai, and we can feel their spiritual beliefs in the way those statues stare out to sea. But their intellectual heart, their history, their poetry, and the lessons they might have for us about societal collapse remains hidden within the inverted carvings of the Rongorongo script. It is a profound mystery born of isolation and tragedy, and for now, it remains utterly and perhaps eternally unsolved. Have you ever heard of a book that no one on Earth can read? Not because it's rare, but because it's written in a language that might not even be from this world. Today, we're diving into one of the most famous and enduring mysteries of all time, the Voynich Manuscript. Discovered in 1912 by a book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich, this 240-page medieval book is filled with bizarre, colorful illustrations and written entirely in an unknown script. It's not just a puzzle, it's a book whose entire identity is based on the fact that it defies decryption. Every codebreaker, every linguist, and every supercomputer that has tried to crack it has walked away defeated. For a long time, people thought it had to be a clever fake, maybe a Renaissance-era prank. But then in 2009, science stepped in. Scientists at the University of Arizona used carbon-14 dating on tiny fragments of the parchment. The results were mind-blowing. The manuscript was made between 1404 and 1438. Even the ink and paints were consistent with the 15th century. So the book is real. The date is real. The mystery, that's real too. Let's talk about the script itself, nicknamed Voynich. It's a beautiful, flowing script with about 20 to 30 unique characters. This small number suggests it's an alphabet, not a complex system of symbols. But here's where it gets weird. Voynich breaks the rules of every known human language. Certain letters only ever appear at the beginning of words, while others only show up at the end. The words themselves are very short, usually between 2 and 10 letters, and they repeat far more often than in any language we know. Statistically, it looks almost alien. The only clues we have to its meaning are the illustrations, which divide the book into 5 sections. First, there's the herbal section, filled with drawings of strange plants that don't seem to exist on Earth. Then, an astronomical section with zodiac charts and celestial diagrams. The most mysterious is the balneological section, which shows small, nude figures bathing in complex networks of green pipes and what look like internal organs. Finally, there are cosmological and pharmaceutical sections, with large fold-out charts and drawings of jars and recipes. Instead of providing answers, these strange pictures just make the mystery even deeper. The herbal section is probably the most famous part of the manuscript. It has over 100 detailed drawings of plants. Here's the catch. Botanists can only identify about 15 of them, like the wild pansy. The other 85% are complete unknowns. Are they plants from a lost continent, documented by a 15th century explorer? Or are they complete fantasies, created to hide the book's true purpose? We simply don't know. Naturally, everyone has tried to crack this thing. The history of the Voynich manuscript is a history of brilliant minds failing. In the 1950s, top American cryptographers gave up, concluding it was a sophisticated cipher. Modern computer scientists have thrown every algorithm at it, but they can't find any recognizable patterns of a simple code. The big debate is whether this is an encoded message or a real but forgotten natural language. If it's a cipher, the real message could be hidden through a complex key, maybe a form of steganography where you only read every third word. If it's a natural language, it's one that vanished without a trace 600 years ago. Because it's so strange, the hoax theory is still on the table, just in a more refined way. Could a clever charlatan in the 15th century have created this masterpiece of gibberish just to sell it to a wealthy, gullible nobleman? This would explain its bizarre statistical properties. If you just make up words with a few simple rules, you could create a text that looks like a language but is impossible to decode. But think about the effort. To create 240 pages of unique, flowing, and consistent script is a monumental task. If it was a hoax, it was the work of a genius who had a lot of time on their hands. Some theories get even more creative. One idea is micrography. The possibility that the real message isn't in the letters themselves, but in tiny, microscopic details within the ink strokes. A researcher in 2017 proposed it was just a form of abbreviated Latin, but that theory was quickly shot down by experts. The idea of a hidden message within the physical writing itself, however, is still being explored. It suggests that we've been looking at the puzzle all wrong, and the real code is hiding in plain sight, just too small for us to see. The manuscript's known history is just as fascinating. In the 17th century, it belonged to an alchemist named Georg Barisch, who was convinced it held profound secrets. He even sent it to a famous scholar, begging for help with the translation. But perhaps its most famous potential owner was John Dee. The brilliant and occult-obsessed advisor to Queen Elizabeth II was fascinated with cryptography and communicating with angels. While we can't prove he owned it, the manuscript's connection to his circle shows that people in that era believed it was a genuinely powerful text of magic or alchemy. So what is the Voynich manuscript? A lost language, an unbreakable code, or the most magnificent hoax in history? It's a real 15th century object, filled with impossible plants and strange diagrams, written in a script that feels both familiar and utterly alien. Its pages are an encyclopedia of knowledge that we are completely unable to read. It is a perfect, silent, and utterly unsolved mystery. What do you think is hidden within its pages? Let me know your theories in the comments below. We're jumping from the ancient world to a mystery that's chillingly modern, yet just as impenetrable. The Taman Shud case, also known as the mystery of the Somerton man. It all starts in the early hours of December 1st, 1948, on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, Australia. A man's body is found slumped against a seawall. He's well dressed, but all the labels have been cut from his clothes. The cause of death? Poisoning. But here's the twist. Not a single trace of poison was ever found. The case immediately became a global sensation, a perfectly preserved body with no identity, and a message written in an unbreakable code. The victim, who became known as the Somerton man, seemed to have gone to extraordinary lengths to erase his own identity. Every single tag from his expensive American-made clothing had been meticulously snipped away. He carried no wallet, no cash, no identification. His pockets held only a few mundane items: an unused train ticket, a comb, some chewing gum, and a box of fancy cigarettes filled with a cheaper brand. The autopsy couldn't find a natural cause of death, but the severe internal congestion led pathologists to a single conclusion: a powerful, fast-acting poison that had vanished without a trace by the time he was discovered. The case went from a puzzling death to an international mystery when detectives made a tiny discovery. Sewn into a hidden pocket in the man's trousers was a tightly rolled slip of paper. Printed on it were two words: Taman Shud. It's a Persian phrase meaning it is ended or finished. Investigators traced it to the final page of a rare 11th century book of poems by Omar Khayyam called the Rubaiyat. This wasn't random, it was a deliberate message. But what did it mean? A final statement? A signal? The note itself was torn from a specific missing copy of the book. Police put out a public appeal, hoping to find the book that the note came from. And miraculously, a man came forward. He'd found a rare edition of the Rubaiyat on the back seat of his unlocked car, which had been parked near Somerton Beach. The book's back cover was damaged, and the last page with the words Taman Shud was torn out. A perfect match. This book should have been the key, the Rosetta Stone for the whole case. But instead, it revealed an even deeper layer of code. Scrawled on the inside back cover were two things: a mysterious 5-line handwritten code and a phone number. This 5-line code is the unbreakable heart of the Taman Shud case. The characters are all capital letters, with one line crossed out. Some of the world's most skilled cryptographers, including analysts from Australian naval intelligence, have tried and failed to decipher it. The letters appear random, there's no clear pattern, and the message is so short that it's nearly impossible to analyze. Theories have flown around for decades. Is it a simple substitution cipher? A more complex one? So far, no one has been able to make it produce a single recognizable word. The code remains completely, genuinely unsolved. The phone number found in the book led police to a woman named Jessica Ellen Thompson, who lived near Somerton Beach. When questioned, she admitted to owning that rare edition of the Rubaiyat and said she'd given it to an army lieutenant named Alfred Boxall during World War II. Police tracked Boxall down, only to find him alive and well with his own intact copy of the book. Later, when shown a plaster bust made of the Somerton man's face, Jessica was reported to be visibly shocked and disturbed, though she publicly denied knowing him. She is the single most important human link in this case, but she took whatever secrets she knew to her grave. The medical mystery is just as baffling as the code. The man's organs showed signs of poisoning, likely from a fast-acting substance, and yet the lack of any residue meant forensic pathologists could never definitively identify what killed him. The way he died, slumped peacefully against the seawall, points strongly towards suicide. But then you have the elaborate steps taken to erase his identity, the coded message, and the phone number of a woman who denied knowing him. All of this screams of a professional hit, maybe even an assassination by a foreign intelligence service. This fundamental contradiction has never been resolved. Given the clean, precise nature of the death, the untraceable poison, the erased identity, and the uncrackable code, the spy theory quickly became the most popular explanation. Remember, 1948 was the dawn of the Cold War, and Adelaide was home to top-secret research facilities. The theory suggests the Somerton man was a Soviet agent who was either murdered by rival spies or took his own life after a mission failed. The book and the code would have been his method of communication. It's a compelling story, but there's no concrete evidence linking the man to any known intelligence agency. For decades, the case was completely cold, but the most significant breakthrough finally happened in 2022. Using modern DNA technology, a forensic genealogist named Derek Abbott and his team successfully extracted a DNA profile from hairs trapped in the original plaster cast of the man's face. Through painstaking genealogical research, they built a family tree and finally gave the Somerton man his name. Carl Charles Webb, a 43-year-old electrical engineer and instrument maker from Melbourne. Webb was separated from his wife and had an interest in poetry and horse racing. While his identity is now known, the code, his cause of death, and his connection to that mysterious woman remain unsolved. The Taman Shud case has transformed from a mystery of identity into a mystery of code and motive. We now know who he was, Carl Webb, but we still don't know what killed him, why he was in Adelaide, what the 5 lines of code mean, or who Jessica Thompson really was to him. That code remains the central, unyielding enigma. It's a perfect modern example of a cryptographic dead end, a chilling reminder that not all secrets are meant to be revealed. The very phrase that started it all, Taman Shud, it is finished, is tragically fitting for the case itself. The core puzzle is, and may forever remain, completely unsolved. Our next enigma brings us to ancient China, a civilization whose history is often considered the most continuous and well-documented in the world. Yet in 1986, an accidental discovery shattered everything we thought we knew about early Chinese Bronze Age art and culture. Near the city of Guang'an, workers at a brick factory were just going about their day when a shovel struck something hard and metallic. What they had stumbled upon were two large sacrificial pits filled with thousands of incredible artifacts. From the earth emerged the lost culture of Sangxingdui, which means 3 star piles. This was a civilization completely unknown to historians, who had always believed the cradle of Chinese civilization was solely in the Yellow River Valley, hundreds of miles away. But this discovery proved they were wrong. The true shock, however, came from the artifacts themselves. The Sangxingdui bronzes bore no resemblance to any art from the same time period. They were unlike anything from the known Shang or Zhou dynasties of the Yellow River. The most famous pieces are the colossal bronze heads, some almost 2 meters tall. Many of them feature striking, almost otherworldly features: prominent noses, deep-set sockets, triangular faces, and massive, exaggerated almond-shaped eyes that sometimes protrude like binoculars. One giant standing figure, over 2.5 meters tall, was found standing on a ritual altar, clad in robes unlike any known Chinese garment. The art was so strange, so alien, that early theories even questioned if the creators were human at all. Let's take a closer look at that colossal standing figure. This piece is a masterwork of Bronze Age engineering, dating all the way back to the 12th century BC. To this day, it remains the largest single bronze artifact from that era found anywhere in the world. The figure stands on an elaborate pedestal, wearing 3 layers of long flowing robes covered in intricate geometric patterns. Its hands are immense, clenched in a ritualistic gesture, as if they once held a large, important object. Scholars speculate it might have been a ceremonial elephant tusk or a grand staff, but the object itself is missing. The sophisticated casting technique, involving multiple pores and complex molds, demonstrates a level of metallurgical skill that rivaled any civilization of its time. Yet this culture seemed to emerge from nowhere and vanished without a trace in the historical record. The most distinctive and completely unsolved feature of the Sangxingdui bronzes has to be the eyes. Many of the colossal heads are actually masks with massive, almost grotesque eyes. They often protrude outwards, and some were even fitted with golden eyelashes. What could they mean? One theory suggests the eyes were designed to represent the concept of clairvoyance or immense spiritual power, allowing the wearer, whether a priest or a king, to see into the afterlife. The large eyes could also be a ritualistic representation of a local deity, but the truth is, the exact meaning of this exaggeration, which is unlike any other Bronze Age art in the world, remains locked away. Why? Because the Sangxingdui people left behind no written language. The 2 pits where these treasures were found were not just dumps, they were clearly sites of sacrifice. They were deliberately filled and sealed after a massive ritual event, likely around the time the city of Sangxingdui was abandoned, somewhere around 1100 BC. The contents were astonishing. Over 100 elephant tusks, thousands of bronze, jade, and gold artifacts. And strangely, dozens of the colossal bronze heads and figures were deliberately smashed, bent, or even burnt before being buried. This act suggests a profound, almost violent ritual, a deliberate destruction of their own sacred objects. Were they trying to appease angry gods, or was it to mark the end of an era? The reason for this mass destruction is entirely unsolved. The greatest roadblock to solving the Sangxingdui puzzle is the complete and total absence of a written script. While the contemporary Shang dynasty, far to the north, was busy inscribing oracle bones with an early form of Chinese writing, the The Sanxingdui culture left behind no discernible writing system at all. This means their history, their beliefs, the names of their kings and their relationship with the Shang are all permanently lost to time. All our interpretations of these bronzes, whether they depict kings, deities, or ancestors, are based purely on artistic speculation and archaeology. We can't rely on any textual evidence. This fascinating culture is effectively mute. Among the most mysterious artifacts is the bronze tree. Found in the second pit, it stands nearly 4 meters tall and is a marvel of intricate craftsmanship. It depicts 9 bronze birds perched on its branches, with a winding dragon at its base. It would have required extraordinary skill to cast. The most common theory links it to later Chinese mythology, suggesting it as a representation of the Fusang tree, a cosmic tree said to be the path between earth and heaven, or the dwelling place of the 10 suns. However, the unique style and specific details of the Sanxingdui tree don't perfectly align with these later myths. Its specific purpose, whether it was a tool for a shamanic ritual, a type of calendar, or a map of the cosmos, is completely unsolved. The timeline of this civilization is just as puzzling as its artifacts. The Sanxingdui culture didn't gradually evolve from previous local cultures. It seems to have appeared suddenly around 2800 BC, already highly developed. Then, just as abruptly, the city appears to have been abandoned around 1100 BC, right after those mass sacrifices took place. The sudden rise suggests a powerful foreign influence, or perhaps a migration of people into the area. The sudden fall could point to an invasion, a catastrophic climate event, or a severe religious crisis. The people simply vanished, leaving behind only their monumental and deliberately destroyed art. The fate of this great Sichuan culture is entirely unsolved. With all these bizarre elements, it's no surprise that the ancient alien theory became so popular. The sheer oddity of the giant protruding eyes and the non-Chinese features led many to suggest that the Sanxingdui people were either influenced by or were themselves an extraterrestrial species. While this is a fun idea, the more scientific explanation points to a local shamanistic culture that deliberately distorted human features to represent the divine. This is similar to grotesque masks found in other indigenous cultures around the world. However, the fact that the art remains so far outside the established Chinese aesthetic forces us to acknowledge that this magnificent civilization followed a religious and artistic path that is, for now, still completely unexplained. In the end, the Sanxingdui bronzes are the silent remnants of a powerful, technologically sophisticated Bronze Age civilization. It thrived in the heart of China, yet remained entirely separate from the historical narrative of the Yellow River. We have their technology, their art, and the evidence of their dramatic religious rituals, but we lack their history, their language, and the reason for their sudden disappearance. The massive, staring bronze eyes offer no answers. For now, this magnificent and mysterious culture remains completely and tantalizingly unsolved. In the ancient world, no one kept records like the Sumerians, Babylonians, and Assyrians of Mesopotamia. They were obsessive chroniclers, documenting everything from laws to the movements of the stars. In the 19th century, deep within the ruins of Nineveh, archaeologists unearthed the legendary library of Ashurbanipal. Among tens of thousands of clay tablets One small, unassuming piece stood out. Catalogued as K48, this little tablet, written around 700 BC, holds a secret that has sparked one of the fiercest debates in modern archaeology. Why? Because this small wedge of clay might just be the world's oldest record of a catastrophic asteroid impact. What makes K48 so special? It's a copy of a much older Sumerian astronomical log, likely dating back to around 3100 BC. This isn't some prophecy or myth. It's the detailed journal of a night watch astronomer. The tablet charts the movement of stars and constellations with incredible precision. But then it describes something extraordinary, a flaming mountain that blazed across the early morning sky. The description of its path was so exact that a team of aerospace engineers, Alan Bond and Mark Hempsel, decided to put it to the test. They fed the data into a computer to reconstruct the night sky from over 5,000 years ago. What they found was astonishing. The computer model revealed something incredible. The trajectory described on that ancient tablet perfectly matched that of a large stony iron meteorite hitting the region. Bond and Hempsel argue that this wasn't just any meteor. They believe it was a massive fragment from the breakup of an even larger asteroid, part of what's known as the Taurid complex. Their calculations pinpointed the impact zone to the Khipus area in the Austrian Alps, around the year 3123 BC. They theorized the impact created an airburst, like the famous Tunguska event, but on a scale so massive it would have triggered global consequences, possibly even a mass extinction event. But here's where the controversy ignites. The idea that a single tablet from Mesopotamia could record a specific impact in the Austrian Alps, thousands of kilometers away, has been met with skepticism. Critics argue that the flaming mountain could have been any bright comet or meteor shower much closer to home. They suggest the translation is being stretched to fit the geological evidence found at Khipus. The academic world is split right down the middle. Is this tablet a precise scientific record of a global catastrophe, or is it just a local mythological account of a pretty light show? The answer could completely rewrite our understanding of early civilization. The entire mystery really boils down to the tricky nature of ancient Sumerian language. Cuneiform can be maddeningly ambiguous. The key phrases that Bond and Hempsel translate as the bowl-shaped object and the broken, flaming mountain could just as easily be interpreted by a traditional scholar as references to a minor god or a standard astrological omen. The debate isn't about the symbols themselves, but about their context. How would you describe a giant space rock hurtling towards Earth if you didn't have the words for asteroid or meteorite? Until experts can agree on the technical meaning of these ancient astronomical terms, the true nature of that flaming object remains a puzzle. Adding another layer of complexity is the fact that Sumerian astronomy was never just about science. It was deeply intertwined with religion and divination. Every celestial event, a comet, a meteor, planets aligning, was seen as a direct message from the gods to the king. So, an astronomer had two jobs. First, to accurately record what they saw, and second, to interpret what it meant as an omen. Tablet K48 is, at its heart, an omen text. This makes it incredibly difficult to separate the hard observation from the mythological interpretation. Was the flaming mountain a real physical rock hurtling through the atmosphere, or was it a divine warning sent from the heavens? We just can't be sure. And yet, the Taurid theory has a powerful ace up its sleeve: the ground truth at Khipus. The site in Austria features a massive elliptical depression that was long thought to be the result of a giant landslide. But modern geological surveys have changed that story. Deep drilling has uncovered evidence of shocked minerals and signs of immense heat, all consistent with a major impact event or a powerful airburst. So, the geological evidence for a catastrophe in that exact time frame is strong. The unsolved question remains: was the Sumerian astronomer, all the way over in Mesopotamia, actually watching the very object that caused this devastation? If the answer is yes, then tablet K48 could solve another massive historical mystery. Around 3200 to 3100 BC, the world experienced a sudden dramatic climate cooling event. This impact winter severely affected early farming civilizations from the Near East all the way to China. A colossal airburst like the one proposed for Khipus would have blasted incredible amounts of dust and aerosols into the atmosphere, triggering exactly this kind of climate shift that could have lasted for years. Solving the tablet's riddle could mean solving the mystery of what drove this ancient climate instability, proving that a cosmic event reshaped human history. But there's one more major hurdle for the impact theory: the precession problem. To prove the connection, the computer model has to be perfect. It needs to accurately map the stars as they were 5,000 years ago, which means accounting for the slow, wobbling shift of the Earth's axis over millennia, a phenomenon called precession. This involves incredibly complex non-linear calculations. Even a tiny error in pinpointing the position of the stars in the 4th millennium BC would completely invalidate the link between the tablet and the Khipus impact. The whole theory hinges on astronomical models that are themselves constantly being refined and revised, leaving the ultimate proof just out of reach. So here we are, left with this small, enigmatic clay tablet. K48 is either the first ever scientific record of a civilization-altering asteroid impact, or it's a routine, religiously inspired account of a fleeting light in the sky. The translation of the words is known, but their true meaning is fiercely debated. Until a definitive consensus is reached on this ancient technical language, this small clay wedge remains the silent, ambiguous witness to a catastrophe that may or may not have changed the course of world history. It's a scientific and linguistic mystery that, for now, remains completely unsolved. The earliest fully legible texts in the world belong to the Sumerian civilization. Now, while most of the first cuneiform tablets were just economic records or administrative lists, basically ancient spreadsheets, one extraordinary set of tablets preserves what is widely considered the world's oldest surviving piece of true literature, the Kesh Temple Hymn. This text, dating all the way back to about 2600 BC, is part architectural dedication, part religious prayer, and a total poetic masterpiece. But the full story of its history and influence remains profoundly unsolved. The Kesh Temple Hymn is a long, elaborate poem that was so important, Sumerian scribes copied it for over 1,000 years. It's a highly formalized ode dedicated to the temple of the goddess Ninhursag in the ancient city of Kesh. The hymn praises the temple's divine origins, its monumental architecture, its central place in the cosmos, and its superiority over all other temples in Mesopotamia. It's a direct, detailed window into early Mesopotamian religious belief and their immense pride in their constructions. The very existence of this standardized text confirms that the Sumerians had a tradition of formal, sacred literature right at the dawn of writing. But who wrote it? The ultimate authorship of the Kesh temple hymn is a complete mystery. According to the text itself, the temple was founded and blessed by the chief Sumerian wind god, Enlil, who then ordered the hymn to be chanted. While mythology gives credit to a divine source, historians believe the final version was likely standardized and compiled by a powerful king or a central priestly authority. Identifying this human source would be a huge key to understanding the political and religious power structures of the early Sumerian city-states. Was this hymn the work of a single, brilliant court poet? Or was it a collection of pre-existing ritual chants that were woven together? We simply don't have a colophon or a final attribution to tell us who the writer was. And what was it for? The primary purpose of the Kesh temple hymn is still debated. Was it purely a dedication text, meant to be recited only once at the temple's consecration? Or was it used year after year as a liturgical text, a recurring prayer or ritual chant used to maintain the temple's divine blessing? The incredible longevity of the hymn, copied for over a millennium, strongly suggests it was used for more than just a single event. It might have even served as a template or a blueprint for all future temple dedications and hymns across Mesopotamia, essentially defining an entire literary genre. Understanding its function is crucial to understanding the role literature played in early Sumerian life. The way the hymn survived also gives us a unique look into the transmission of literature. In the 2nd millennium BC, long after the city of Kesh itself had fallen into decline, the hymn was adopted as a scribal exercise. It became a standard text for students learning cuneiform in the Eduba, or scribe school. This is why so many copies have survived to this day. But this raises an unsolved question. Did the hymn survive because it was a genuinely popular piece of literature, beloved by the people? Or was it just forcibly preserved by the educational system long after its religious relevance had faded? Was it a favorite text, or just a convenient piece of mandatory, outdated homework? The hymn also stands at a critical crossroads between simple economic records and the complex mythological stories that came later. It's not a narrative story, but it contains clear references to the Sumerian creation myth, mentioning the separation of heaven and earth. So the unsolved question is, how did this hymn influence the development of later, great Mesopotamian epics like the Epic of Gilgamesh? Did its formalized poetic structure and divine attribution set a precedent for all the religious literature that followed? It's a foundational piece of literature, but its exact place in the evolution of human storytelling remains a complete mystery. Ironically, despite the survival of its most famous hymn, the actual archaeological site of Kesh is still largely unexcavated and undated. The existence of such a magnificent hymn praising the city's monumental nature implies that Kesh must have been a major power in the 3rd millennium BC, yet the physical evidence on the ground is scarce. This creates a huge, unsolved disconnect between the literary record, the hymn, and the archaeological record, the ruins. Was the hymn just an exaggeration of a minor city's importance? Or does the real temple, in all its glory, lie deep beneath the unexcavated mounds, just waiting to be discovered? Linguistically, The Kesh Temple hymn is known for its unique simplicity. Unlike later Sumerian texts which use very complex verb structures, the hymn uses highly repetitive and parallel phrasing. It almost sounds like a children's rhyme or a nursery song. This simplicity is debated among scholars. Is it a sign that the Sumerian language of 2600 BC was genuinely simpler than it was later on? Or was the text deliberately written in a simple, accessible style to make it easier to memorize and recite, especially for a wider audience that might include non-literate temple visitors? This linguistic question impacts how we understand the entire development of the Sumerian language itself. And because the hymn was used as a teaching text, many of the surviving tablets contain scribal errors and omissions. Some versions are missing entire lines or have words swapped around. This means modern scholars have had to painstakingly piece together the definitive master version of the hymn from dozens of flawed student copies. This presents another unsolved problem. How much of the hymn's perceived meaning is a modern construction based on our best guess compilation? And how much is the actual original divine word? In a way, the final definitive text of the world's oldest piece of literature is still unsolved. The Kesh Temple hymn is a magnificent achievement. It established a literary tradition that would define Mesopotamia for the next 3,000 years. It survived wars, invasions, and even the death of its own language, preserved by generations of scribes. And yet its author, the exact reason for its longevity, the full extent of its influence, and the archaeological reality of the very temple it praises, all of these remain wrapped in ambiguity. The hymn speaks to us from across the millennia, but the full story behind it is entirely and beautifully unsolved. In the sun-scorched cliffs near the Dead Sea, a discovery was made in 1952 that would rewrite our understanding of ancient history. Archaeologists exploring the Qumran caves, famous for the Dead Sea Scrolls, found thousands of religious texts, psalms, prophecies, and ancient laws. But in Cave 3 they stumbled upon something utterly unique, an artifact that stood apart from all the others, the Copper Scroll. It wasn't written on fragile parchment or papyrus, but etched onto thin sheets of almost pure copper. And this scroll wasn't a religious text, it was a list, a detailed technical inventory of 64 caches of buried treasure. It was, and still is, the ultimate unsolved mystery of the ancient world. The scroll was so brittle from oxidation that it couldn't be unrolled. Scientists in England had to carefully cut it into 23 strips to reveal its secrets. What they found was mind-boggling. Written in a peculiar form of Hebrew, the text detailed a massive hoard of gold, silver, incense, and priestly garments, along with precise locations where they were hidden. The numbers are staggering: over 4,630 talents of gold and silver. In today's money, that's worth several $billion. The common belief is that this was the legendary treasure of the Temple of Jerusalem, hidden away just before the invading Roman legions destroyed the city in 70 AD. The Copper Scroll isn't just a historical document, it's a real-life treasure map. But here's where the mystery deepens. The directions are both incredibly specific and completely unsolvable. Take this, for example. In the cistern which is under the south side of the court of the burial ground, in the mound of smooth stone, in the niche of the cistern lid, is silver, 90 talents. Or, in the cave that is next to the former, in the third tier, 65 bars of gold. These directions are crystal clear. If you lived in Judea 2,000 years ago, They rely on landmarks, cisterns, tombs, and buildings that have long since vanished, buried under the sands of time. Without knowing the original landscape, the map is useless. It's like getting directions from a ghost to a place that no longer exists. Adding another layer of intrigue is the language itself. The other Dead Sea Scrolls are written in a formal literary Hebrew. The Copper Scroll, however, is written in a strange, almost conversational style. It's filled with unusual spellings, unique vocabulary, and even words borrowed from Greek. It reads less like Holy Scripture and more like a secret ledger or a foreman's notes. This suggests the author was a specialist, maybe a temple official, who used a private code or vernacular. This linguistic anomaly makes translation tricky, creating debates over the exact meaning of the landmarks described. The sheer scale of the treasure has led some scholars to a radical conclusion. What if it's all a fantasy? They argue that moving and hiding such an immense fortune would have been a monumental undertaking, one that surely would have been mentioned in other historical records. Perhaps the scroll is just ancient folklore, a story created to inspire hope among a people facing destruction. But then, why go to the trouble of engraving it on expensive, durable copper? The meticulous detail and the authoritative tone feel so real, suggesting it's a genuine administrative record. The debate rages on, and the truth of the treasure remains unsolved. So who wrote it? Identifying the author is key to cracking the code. There are three main suspects. First, the Essenes, the ascetic community living at Qumran where the scroll was found. But their simple, anti-materialistic lifestyle doesn't quite fit with an obsession over billions in gold. Second, the Zealots, the Jewish rebels who fought the Romans. They briefly controlled the temple and its treasury. Or third, and most likely, the temple priests themselves. They would have had access to the treasure and the motive to hide it. But even then, the scroll's unique language doesn't perfectly match any known priestly writings. The identity of the owner of this incredible fortune remains a mystery. Even the grammar of the scroll presents a puzzle. The verbs used can be interpreted in two completely different ways: as they buried, in the past tense, or as you shall bury, a command for the future. This tiny detail changes everything. Is the scroll a record of treasure already hidden, waiting to be found? Or is it a set of instructions for a future event, a symbolic list of offerings to be collected someday? This ambiguity means we can't even be certain if the treasure is actually in the ground. Of course, people have tried to find it. In the 1960s, a British scholar named John Allegro led the only major expedition to hunt for the Copper Scroll's treasure. Armed with the best knowledge of the time, his team scoured the Judean wilderness. They found ancient pottery and some coins, but no vast caches of gold and silver. Their failure led many to dismiss the scroll as fiction. But Allegro's team didn't have the technology we have today, like ground-penetrating radar. It's entirely possible they were standing right on top of a treasure trove and never even knew it. This brings us to a modern-day dilemma. Even if we could decipher the locations, should we even look? The areas described around Jerusalem and Qumran are archaeological gold mines themselves. Every inch of soil contains priceless historical data. Digging massive trenches based on 2,000-year-old vague directions would be incredibly destructive. We could end up destroying more history than the treasure itself is worth. This ethical problem, more than anything, ensures the Copper Scroll's secrets will likely remain safe, and its mystery unsolved. So there it sits, under glass in a museum in Jordan, a silent testament to a lost world. The Copper Scroll is not a cryptic prophecy or a forgotten prayer. It's a practical, technical inventory of a colossal fortune hidden just before a cataclysmic moment in history. We have the list, we have the general location, but the final key, the precise X on the map, remains locked away by lost landmarks, linguistic puzzles, and the passage of time. The world's greatest treasure map is, for now, completely and stubbornly unsolved. Our journey today takes us deep into the humid, forested flatlands of Mexico's Gulf Coast, to the heartland of Mesoamerica's mother culture, the Olmec. Flourishing from around 1500 BC to 400 BC, the Olmec laid the foundations for later civilizations like the Maya and the Aztec. They developed the region's first complex calendar, built monumental structures, and even mastered a sophisticated rubber processing industry. But their greatest and most mysterious legacy is a series of massive sculpted portraits that remain one of the most spectacular and unsolved artistic enigmas in the world, the Olmec colossal heads. To date, 17 of these incredible heads have been unearthed across 4 main sites in Mexico. And when I say massive, I mean it. They stand between 6 and 9 feet tall and weigh anywhere from 8 to a staggering 40 tons. That's like 8 African elephants. Each head is a unique portrait, suggesting they depict specific high-status individuals, likely powerful rulers or revered ancestors. Every face wears a distinct, elaborate headdress, often thought to be a protective helmet. The realism and precision of the carving are astounding, yet who they were and how they were made remain a complete mystery. The most persistent and controversial question surrounding these heads is their facial features. They have broad, flat noses, thick lips, and powerful jaws, features that many observers have interpreted as distinctly African. This fueled the famous but highly contested theory that the Olmec civilization was influenced by travelers from West Africa. Mainstream archaeology, however, rejects this idea, pointing to a complete lack of supporting evidence. No African artifacts, genetics, or ancient vessels have ever been found. The prevailing theory is that the sculptures simply reflect the native Mesoamerican features of the Olmec people, just carved in a monumental, stylized way. But the specific reason for these distinct features still defies a single, comfortable explanation. The technical feat required to create these heads is simply staggering. The basalt rock used for carving didn't come from nearby. The closest quarries were in the Tuxtla Mountains, located 40 to 90 miles away from the main Olmec centers. Now picture this. The Olmec had no horses, no oxen, and no wheels for transporting heavy loads. This means those 40-ton blocks of stone had to be moved solely by human power, using a combination of sledges, ropes, and log rollers, often across treacherous floodplains, swamps, and rivers. How they managed this incredible logistical puzzle of moving and installing these immense stones is a question that remains completely unsolved. An important clue to the head's purpose might lie in their fate. Many were found deliberately mutilated, noses chipped off, eyes defaced, or large pieces broken away, before being carefully buried. This wasn't the work of foreign invaders, but a systematic internal act. This deliberate destruction and burial suggests some kind of ritual or political deposition. Did this happen when a ruler died? or when a dynasty was overthrown? Was burying the head meant to ritually kill the ruler's spirit to prevent their influence from beyond the grave? The meaning of this mass destruction and interment is a significant, unsolved ritual mystery. Without a deciphered written language, the most basic question, who are these people, is impossible to answer. Archaeologists simply refer to them by their location, like San Lorenzo Colossal Head 6. We know they are portraits because no two are identical, but we have no names, no dates, no context. Were they high priests, warrior kings, ancestor figures venerated for centuries? The total lack of any text means the faces staring back at us are eternally nameless, their historical significance locked away in time. To make things even more complex, there's physical evidence that some heads were recarved or repurposed. Archaeologists have noted that certain heads were originally larger or had different features, suggesting they were carved down from an existing portrait or even a monumental altar. This presents an unsolved political mystery. Did the Olmec reuse the stone for economic reasons? Or was this a powerful political act, one ruler demonstrating dominance by literally erasing and replacing the image of a fallen predecessor? The meaning is entirely dependent on a political context we simply do not have. Every single head wears a distinctive, complex headpiece. These are often interpreted as protective helmets worn for a ritual sport known as the Mesoamerican Bull Game, an event often associated with sacrifice and religious significance. The helmets frequently feature specific symbols like jaguar claws or stylized ears of corn, which likely represented the ruler's rank, lineage, or spirit animal. If we could decipher the iconography on these helmets, we might be able to categorize the rulers and even create a dynastic timeline. But for now, the meaning of these specific symbols remains entirely unsolved. The frustrating thing is, the Olmec were so close to solving their own mystery for us. The Cascajal block, a stone tablet dating to around 900 BC, contains 62 symbols and is considered the earliest known writing system in the Western Hemisphere. Although it's likely Olmec, the script remains undeciphered. If this script could ever be cracked, it would provide the missing context for the colossal heads, giving us the names, dates, and stories of the powerful individuals immortalized in stone. The mystery of the heads is directly linked to the unsolved puzzle of the Olmec script. In the end, the Olmec colossal heads are a powerful declaration of artistic mastery from Mesoamerica's mother culture. They present a perfect three-part enigma: the identity of the massive featured rulers, the logistical impossibility of their transport across a swampy landscape, and the political meaning behind their ritual destruction and burial. Today, these 17 powerful faces stare out across history from museums, their names and stories locked away in the silence of their own great lost civilization. They remain completely and fascinatingly unsolved. Picture this: the high arid plains of Bolivia near the shores of Lake Titicaca. It's the 1950s, and a local farmer working his land stumbles upon something extraordinary. Not treasure, not gold, but a large, intricately decorated ceramic bowl. This humble discovery, now known as the Fuente Magna Bowl, would ignite one of the most explosive and enduring controversies in modern archaeology. Why? Because etched inside this Andean artifact is a script that has no business being there. A script that looks eerily like ancient Sumerian. Let's take a closer look at this vessel. On the outside, it's decorated with animal and human-like figures, designs typical of the local Tiwanaku culture that flourished here nearly 1,000 years ago. But the inside tells a completely different story. It contains two distinct sets of characters that are utterly foreign to the Americas. The first, and most shocking, appears to be a form of proto-cuneiform, the script of the Sumerians from ancient Mesopotamia. The second, around the rim, resembles an ancient Phoenician or Semitic script. The presence of writing from the ancient Near East on a ritual bowl dug up in Bolivia is an anomaly so profound, it borders on the unbelievable. This single artifact is the smoking gun for a highly controversial idea known as the transoceanic diffusion theory. This theory proposes that ancient civilizations, like the Sumerians, Phoenicians, or Egyptians, crossed the vast oceans and made contact with the peoples of the New World long before Columbus. If the writing on the Fuente Magna bowl is genuine Sumerian, it would completely shatter our established timeline of history. It would prove that people from Mesopotamia reached the Andes thousands of years ago. This is why the debate is so fierce. It's not just an academic squabble. It's a direct challenge to the entire history of the Western Hemisphere as we know it. Naturally, the first question everyone asks is it real? The bowl's authenticity is the central unsolved mystery. Skeptics argue it's a clever modern forgery, created to fetch a high price. Yet studies of the clay and the firing techniques show they are consistent with local Tiwanaku pottery of the period. The real problem is the inscription itself. Was it carved into the clay when it was wet, before it was fired, or was it painstakingly engraved into the hardened ceramic much later? If it was inscribed pre-firing, it suggests it was made locally, which deepens the mystery. The physical evidence is maddeningly inconclusive, leaving the question of its authenticity completely up in the air. Despite the authenticity debate, some researchers have boldly attempted to translate the cuneiform-like script. Epigrapher Clyde Winters, for example, proposed that the script was a form of Proto-Sumerian. His translation reads like a spiritual invocation, something along the lines of, "Approach in the future for a person endowed with great protection, the great Nia." He linked Nia to a goddess of fertility. While this sounds incredibly compelling, it's a translation based on his own unique interpretation of the symbols. Not a single mainstream Sumerian scholar has accepted his findings, leaving the translation in a state of academic limbo, unproven and unverified by consensus. As if one impossible script wasn't enough, the bowl features a second set of symbols, believed to be Phoenician or Proto-Semitic. This just throws another wrench into an already complex puzzle. If Sumerians somehow made it to Bolivia, did Phoenicians come along for the ride? Or did they arrive centuries apart and happen to leave their mark on the very same object? The idea of two separate Old World cultures independently finding their way to the high Andes and inscribing the same ritual bowl presents a scenario that seems almost impossible. This dual script makes the historical narrative of the bowl even more difficult to solve. The local context of the find is just as perplexing. The Tiwanaku civilization was remarkably advanced, known for its monumental stone architecture and sophisticated agriculture. But their pottery, while beautiful, never featured foreign writing. If a Sumerian or Phoenician vessel did somehow arrive, it would have been an incredibly rare and valuable item. So why would the Tiwanaku people use this exotic object for their own sacred rituals? And why would they leave the foreign writing intact instead of decorating over it? The bowl's discovery in a distinctly local context, yet bearing foreign script, creates a cultural contradiction that remains entirely unsolved. Perhaps the biggest obstacle to solving the Fuente Magna mystery is the deafening silence that surrounds it. There is simply no other supporting evidence. In the thousands of archaeological sites excavated across the Andes, from Tiwanaku to the Inca Empire, not one other artifact with confirmed Sumerian, Phoenician, or any Old World script has ever been found. The Fuente Magna bowl stands completely alone. For the diffusion theory to hold water, you'd expect to find a pattern, more inscribed objects, trade goods, or even shared DNA. Without a single piece of corroborating evidence, the bowl remains an isolated anomaly, a historical miracle or an elaborate hoax. Because of this intense controversy, the Fuente Magna bowl is effectively trapped in an ethical and academic deadlock. Mainstream archaeologists are hesitant to perform expensive and potentially destructive tests on an object they suspect might be a fake, especially without any other supporting finds. Meanwhile, proponents of the diffusion theory often lack the academic credentials and funding to access the bowl and conduct the conclusive analysis needed. So, the bowl sits, largely unstudied, in a museum in La Paz, its secrets locked away, waiting for a future discovery that may never happen. The Fuente Magna bowl is a relic that whispers of an impossible history. It holds a message that, if authentic, would force us to rewrite the story of human exploration, proving ancient contact between the cradles of civilization in the East and the great empires of the Andes. But with no definitive proof of its authenticity and a complete lack of corroborating evidence, it remains a tantalizing, ambiguous vessel. It's the potential key to one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries, a mystery that challenges the very foundations of our past. This place is world famous for its massive stone walls, with some blocks weighing over 125 tons, fitted together so perfectly you can't even slide a piece of paper between them. The engineering behind the fortress is a puzzle in itself, but hidden in plain sight, scattered throughout the complex, lies an even stranger enigma, a network of intricately carved, polished rock channels. They're known as the Sacsayhuaman water channels, and they are a maze with no apparent exit. As you explore the lower sections of Sacsayhuaman, you'll find these incredible carvings. They're not just rough grooves in the rock. The surfaces are polished smooth, and the channels wind and twist with precise, often beautiful, undulating gradients. They form a complex three-dimensional labyrinth carved into the living bedrock and massive stationary stones. It's obvious they were designed to carry a liquid, most likely water or maybe even chicha, the sacred fermented corn beer of the Inca, in a very deliberate, controlled flow. But where was it all going? That's where the real mystery begins. The core problem with these channels is that they don't seem to have a purpose. They start at a high point, often a small basin carved into the rock, and then they meander on a complex journey, but they all just end. They flow over the edge of a stone and drain into the ground. They don't water fields, they don't fill reservoirs, and they don't connect to any larger water system. It's like they were designed for a task that was finished the moment the liquid completed its short, winding trip. So what on earth were they for? One theory suggests this was a sort of ancient hydraulic laboratory. We know the Inca were absolute masters of water management, building aqueducts and irrigation systems that defy belief. So perhaps these channels were a way for their engineers to test fluid dynamics. They could measure flow rates, pressure, and friction on different channel designs before building them on a massive scale. The smooth, carefully sloped surfaces certainly support this idea. But if it was just a technical testing ground, why place it in such a prominent public part of the complex? It feels like it was meant to be seen. This brings us to the most widely accepted theory, that the channels served a ritual purpose. For the Inca, water and chicha were sacred, seen as the lifeblood of Pachamama, or Mother Earth. The channels may have been used for libations, where a priest would pour the sacred liquid into the top pool. The winding journey through the stone maze would have been a sacred ritual in itself. And at the end, the liquid would be symbolically returned to the earth, consumed by it as it flowed off the rock. This would explain why they end so abruptly and why they're located in a public area. The only problem is, no Inca text or Spanish chronicle ever describes a ritual like this, so its exact meaning remains a complete unknown. Could there be a celestial connection? The Inca were brilliant astronomers, and Sacsayhuaman was almost certainly an observatory for tracking the sun, moon, and stars. Some believe the channels were designed to align with the sun's shadows on key dates like the solstices. Imagine a channel filled with water, its surface reflecting the sun's light, acting as a kind of solar clock. It's a captivating idea, but so far the alignments aren't precise enough to be proven. It's another compelling theory that we just can't confirm, and the mystery deepens when you look beneath the surface. The entire area is riddled with subterranean tunnels known as chincanas. Local legends speak of a vast secret network of tunnels connecting Sacsayhuaman all the way to the Temple of the Sun in Cusco. Archaeologists have found small sections, but the main labyrinth is collapsed or was intentionally sealed. Some researchers wonder if the surface channels were somehow connected to a hidden hydraulic system deep inside these tunnels, maybe for some secret purification rite. But with the chincanas sealed off, we have no way of knowing. It's a tantalizing but completely unsolvable piece of the puzzle. Let's talk about how these channels were even made. The rock isn't just carved. The inside of the channels is polished to an almost mirror-like sheen. Remember, the Inca didn't have iron tools. They likely used stone hammers, bronze chisels, and sand and water to slowly grind and polish the hard bedrock. The sheer amount of work to achieve this level of finish is staggering. It tells us that these channels weren't just a casual project. They were incredibly important, a deliberate and crucial part of the site's design, which again points to the sacredness of whatever flowed through them. What makes these channels so baffling is how they contradict everything else we know about Inca waterworks. At other famous sites like Ollantaytambo or Tipon, the water channels are masterpieces of efficiency. They run in straight, logical lines to irrigate terraces and supply water to fountains and baths. They are practical and functional. The channels at Sacsayhuaman, however, are the complete opposite. They are winding, inefficient, and seemingly pointless. This stark contrast is the strongest argument for a ritual purpose, but without a text to explain the ritual's logic. The design remains an unsolved riddle. So, what are we left with? The Sacsayhuaman water channels are a stunning, permanent record of Inca genius, a perfectly preserved stone maze designed to guide a sacred fluid from somewhere to nowhere. We can see them, we can touch them, and we can marvel at the immense care taken to create them. But the ultimate reason for their existence, whether it was for ritual, science, or astronomy, remains locked away in the silent history of the Inka. The water has long since dried up, but the mystery continues to flow entirely unsolved. Our journey takes us to the late 1990s, to the volatile and rugged mountains of Afghanistan, near the famous Buddhas of Bamiyan. Here, smugglers and locals stumbled upon a complex of sealed caves. What they found inside was a treasure beyond imagination, a library of ancient manuscripts that held the promise of unlocking the history of the legendary Silk Road kingdom of Gandhara. These were the Cave of the Manuscripts, and their contents have become one of the greatest and most tragic unsolved mysteries in Central Asian history. The manuscripts, dating from the 2nd to the 8th centuries AD, were a historian's dream. They were written on delicate birch bark, palm leaves, and parchment in a variety of scripts, mainly Gandhari and Sanskrit. This wasn't just a collection of texts, it was the lost library of the Buddhist and Hindu kingdoms that once thrived along the Silk Road. But this story doesn't have a happy ending. Amidst civil war and chaos, the manuscripts were never properly recovered by archaeologists. Instead, looters stormed the caves, breaking up the collection, damaging the fragile scrolls, and smuggling them out of Afghanistan to the black market in Peshawar, Pakistan. In a single devastating act, the archaeological context, the crucial key to dating and understanding these texts, was completely and irrevocably lost. So, the greatest mystery of all is, what exactly was in this lost library? From the small fraction of manuscripts that have been painstakingly recovered and studied, we've gotten a tantalizing glimpse. The library contained profound works of Buddhist philosophy, including Abhidharma and Vinaya texts. It also held secular literature, poetry, medical texts, and possibly even astronomical treatises. Most intriguingly, it contained unknown texts written in a lost local script. The missing portions could hold the definitive records of the ancient Kushan Empire, a powerful civilization that once connected Rome, India, and China. We know the library was vast, but the most important texts, the ones detailing local history, laws, and royal records, are still missing or unidentified. The bulk of its contents remains a profound, unsolved puzzle. Many of these precious texts were written on birch bark, a material that is notoriously fragile. The moment these ancient scrolls were exposed to air, moisture, and light after centuries in the dark, they began to rapidly deteriorate. The rough handling by looters only made it worse, shattering large scrolls into thousands of tiny, meaningless fragments. This incredible fragility has turned the process of conservation and translation into a painstaking, almost impossible task. The scientific challenge is immense. Much of the remaining content is simply unreadable, having literally crumbled to dust before it could be properly catalogued. The secrets of these texts are, for the most part, permanently unsolved, and the mystery deepens. Among the known Buddhist and Sanskrit texts, scholars have tentatively identified fragments of a completely unknown script. This script doesn't match any known variations of Gandhari, Brahmi, or Kharoshthi. This discovery suggests a mind-blowing possibility. The library may have contained documents written in a lost local language unique to the mountain communities of ancient Afghanistan. This language could have held local histories, myths, and traditions that have vanished from the historical record. Like the famous Voynich manuscript, this unidentified script is a linguistic black box, locking away a portion of the library's contents that we may never be able to retrieve. The story of the scrolls after their discovery in the 1990s is another unsolved mystery, a mystery of provenance. We have no idea who bought them on the black market, which manuscripts were kept together, or how they were bundled and sold. Today, major pieces of this lost library are scattered across the globe, hidden away in private collections, museums, and anonymous storage units in Japan, Europe, and America. This loss of context is an absolute disaster for researchers. A scroll fragment in a Tokyo museum might logically connect to another fragment in London, but because their original order was lost, that connection will likely never be made. The original organization of the library, the key to understanding its full scope, is entirely and tragically unsolved. Why does this loss matter so much? Because this library had the potential to fill a massive gap in our understanding of Central Asian history. The period between the decline of the Great Kushan Empire and the arrival of Islam is one of the least documented eras in the region's past. The Cave of the Manuscripts was perfectly positioned to contain the secular, political, and historical records of the local kings and rulers of that time. These texts could have provided the definitive political timeline, mapped out ancient trade routes, and revealed the local laws of this crucial historical bridge. All of that knowledge remains completely unsolved. The library also likely held original Gandhari versions of key Buddhist texts that we only know today through later Chinese or Tibetan translations. Having the originals could resolve centuries of scholarly debates over the precise meaning and linguistic nuances of early Buddhist philosophy. We saw a glimpse of this potential with the most famous recovered text, the Gandhari Dharmapada, which shed incredible new light on the scripture. But the vast majority of the core Buddhist canon from that cave remains missing, meaning the original linguistic form of some of Buddhism's key philosophical ideas is still unsolved. Today, the recovery effort is a slow, difficult attempt to reassemble a shattered puzzle. Major institutions around the world are working to digitize the fragments they hold, allowing scholars to compare pieces across continents in a massive collaborative effort. This requires incredible international cooperation and significant funding. However, the largest and most complete manuscripts are likely still held by anonymous private collectors who demand exorbitant prices for their release. This ensures that the majority of the library's contents will remain outside the academic world, their secrets unsolved. The story of the Cave of the Manuscripts is a profound historical tragedy. It was a time capsule that was opened too early and in the worst possible way, releasing a flood of priceless, fragile knowledge directly into the hands of looters. We know that a comprehensive library of secular and religious history existed, a unique record of a lost Silk Road kingdom that stood between the great powers of the ancient world. But its true content, its context, and the full extent of this incredible library remain scattered, damaged, and entirely heartbreakingly unsolved. The Giza Plateau in Egypt is, without a doubt, the most studied archaeological site on Earth. For centuries, archaeologists have meticulously examined every grain of sand, every mysterious shaft, and every massive stone. And yet, right under our noses, beneath the scorching desert sun and the timeless gaze of the Sphinx, new, profound, and utterly unsolved mysteries are still emerging, forcing us to question everything we thought we knew. Our journey today takes us deep beneath the surface to a recent discovery made possible by cutting-edge technology. A massive, unexplained structure known only as the Giza Anomaly. This incredible discovery wasn't made with shovels and brushes, but through the wonders of non-invasive remote sensing. Imagine teams of scientists deploying advanced ground-penetrating radar and electrical resistivity tomography across the sands of Giza. These incredible tools act like a planetary-scale MRI, sending energy waves deep into the earth and measuring the echoes that bounce back. This allows them to create a detailed 3D map of what lies hidden in the bedrock, all without disturbing a single stone. Between 2017 and 2021, these surveys consistently pinged something extraordinary, a significant, large-scale, and completely unidentified structure buried deep beneath the famous Western Cemetery. So what exactly did they find? The data paints a picture of a massive feature that is clearly not a natural formation. The anomaly shows a high contrast in electrical resistivity compared to the solid limestone all around it. This is the telltale signature of a complex man-made structure, something that is potentially hollow or even contains multiple chambers. It's situated near the tombs of the Old Kingdom's elite, but it's far larger and much deeper than any standard mastaba tomb we've ever found there. The scans suggest it's a huge rectangular structure, stretching for dozens of meters in both length and depth. Its colossal size points to one of two possibilities. It's either a lost monumental tomb or a hidden substructure directly connected to the construction of the pyramids themselves. But here's where the mystery deepens. Despite being so close to the Great Pyramid, no visible entrance, no shaft, no surface marker has ever been found that leads down to this anomaly. Think about it. Every other major tomb on the plateau has a known entry point. The fact that this enormous structure has remained perfectly sealed and completely undetected for 4,500 years is baffling. It implies one of two things. Either its builders went to extraordinary lengths to deliberately conceal the entrance forever, or the entire project was abandoned before it was ever finished and connected to the world above. Its silent, sealed nature is the very heart of this unsolved puzzle. This leads us to our first major theory. The anomaly is an unfinished royal tomb. This is the most straightforward explanation. The Western Cemetery was the final resting place for the highest-ranking nobles and officials of the Fourth Dynasty, the very era of the Great Pyramid builders. The sheer scale of this anomaly suggests it was intended for someone of immense importance, like a king or a queen. Perhaps a successor to Khufu died unexpectedly, forcing the ambitious project to be abruptly halted, sealed, and forgotten. This theory explains the structure's monumental size and its prestigious location. However, the radar data, while impressive, isn't sharp enough to reveal specific architectural details, leaving us unable to confirm if it was truly designed as a tomb. Now for a more radical idea. What if the anomaly isn't a tomb at all, but a functional part of the pyramid complex itself? The pyramid builders were master engineers who often created complex subterranean networks for ritualistic or practical purposes. Could the Giza anomaly be a massive hidden chamber for a counterweight system used during construction, or perhaps a giant underground cistern for storing the vast amounts of water needed. It might even be a symbolic, ritualistic portal designed to connect the pharaoh's pyramid to the mythical underworld or the life-giving Nile. If this theory holds true, discovering its purpose could rewrite our understanding of how the pyramids were built and what they truly represented to the ancient Egyptians. This isn't the first time a huge, unknown structure has been found under the plateau. The Giza anomaly is likely related to a previous and somewhat controversial discovery from the 1990s. Near this very spot, the famed archaeologist Zahi Hawass unearthed a deep shaft that led down to a complex of subterranean chambers. This find, known as the Hawass shaft, was explored and then sealed again, but it proved that a hidden, unmapped world exists deep beneath the sands of Giza. The Giza anomaly could very well be another part of this vast, interconnected network of tunnels and chambers, an ancient underworld that we have only just begun to glimpse. So if we know this massive structure is there, why haven't we just started digging? This is the core of the problem, the ethical dilemma of excavation. Digging a massive shaft dozens of meters deep into the Giza plateau is an incredibly risky operation. It could destabilize the ancient bedrock, which already has fractures and voids. It could cause irreparable damage to the priceless neighboring tombs. Even just introducing air and moisture into a 4,500-year-old sealed environment could trigger rapid decay. The Egyptian authorities have rightly prioritized a non-invasive, do-no-harm approach. For now, the risk of destroying our shared heritage far outweighs the reward of immediate discovery, leaving the anomaly locked in a state of suspended animation. If we could identify it, the payoff would be huge. Given its monumental scale and prime location, the structure almost certainly dates to the 4th dynasty, the age of the legendary pharaohs Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. It could be the missing link that helps us understand the evolution of their colossal building projects. Uncovering who built it and for what purpose would solve a significant piece of the puzzle of Egyptian history. But until an entrance is found, or until a safe method of exploration is developed, the true identity and purpose of this structure will remain one of the greatest unsolved questions in archaeology. The Giza Plateau is a place of endless wonder, a landscape that stubbornly refuses to give up all its secrets. Even with our most advanced technology, we have only confirmed that something huge, intelligently designed, and profoundly mysterious lies waiting beneath our feet. Is it an unfinished royal tomb, a lost piece of an ancient machine, or a sacred ritual chamber sealed for eternity? For now, the Giza anomaly remains a genuine, monumental mystery, a dark, silent void on our maps of the past that is, for the time being, completely unsolved. We journey back in time to the towering peaks of the Andes, home to the last great civilization before the European conquest, the magnificent Inca Empire. Known as Tawantinsuyu, this was an empire of master engineers and administrators. They tamed rugged mountains for agriculture, carved monumental stones with breathtaking precision, and built a massive network of roads that stitched their vast territory together. But for all their genius, the Inca possessed a profound mystery. Unlike every other great empire in history, they had no known system of writing as we understand it. No ink, no paper, no carved hieroglyphs. Instead, They recorded everything, from census data and tax records to vast inventories, and perhaps even their histories and myths, using a truly unique system of intricately knotted colored strings. They called it the Khipu. Today, this complex three-dimensional language remains one of history's greatest unsolved puzzles. So what exactly is a Khipu? Imagine a primary horizontal chord. From this main chord hang numerous smaller pendant chords, and from those even more subsidiary chords can be attached. The real genius, the information itself, is stored in the knots tied along these strings. The system is undeniably complex, a sophisticated code relying on at least 4 key variables. First, the knot type. There isn't just one kind of knot. There are long knots, figure-8 knots, and simple single knots, each likely holding a different meaning. Second, the knot's position. The height and placement of a knot on its chord represent a decimal place value, a base 10 system. This part of the code, the numerical data, is something we've actually cracked. We can read the numbers in the Khipus. Third, color. The color of each chord, brown, red, blue, even striped, was used to categorize the subject. For instance, a red chord might signify soldiers, while a brown one could represent a tally of potatoes. Finally, even the direction of the fiber's twist, an S-twist versus a Z-twist, is thought to encode information. So while we can confidently read the numbers, the vast majority of the Khipu's secrets, the narrative data, remains completely locked away. Khipus are generally divided into 2 main categories: numerical Khipus and what researchers call narrative Khipus. The numerical ones, used for accounting tasks like census counts and warehouse inventories, are usually structurally simple. Their secrets are the ones we've managed to unlock. But the narrative Khipus are a different beast entirely. They are far more complex, often displaying wild and unusual color patterns, knotting systems that don't follow the simple decimal rule, and asymmetrical chord arrangements. It is within these intricate knotted webs that researchers believe the true treasures of Inca culture are hidden. Their unwritten history, their laws, their royal genealogies, and perhaps even their epic poetry and literature. The fundamental problem is making the linguistic leap. We understand how a knot can represent 10 sheep. But how do you tie a knot that represents the word king or the verb to conquer? That is the mystery we have yet to solve. Tragically, the key to deciphering this knotted language was lost almost as soon as the Spanish arrived in the 16th century. The keepers of this knowledge were specialists called Quipucamayos. These were the official Khipu keepers, the individuals responsible for creating, reading, and archiving these intricate records. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived, they viewed the Khipus with deep suspicion. They feared these knotted strings contained coded messages for rebellion, or perhaps directions to hidden troves of gold and treasure. As a result, they systematically persecuted the Quipucamayos, often executing them and ordering the destruction of the Khipus themselves. In the space of a single generation, the specialized knowledge needed to read the complex narrative Khipus, the cultural context, the oral traditions, the phonetic connections, was deliberately and violently extinguished. The Khipus became a tragic casualty of colonial conquest, their voices silenced forever. The Inca people spoke Quechua, a language that thankfully is still widely spoken by millions in the Andes today. This offers a potential key. The logical approach to cracking the Khipus code is to find a system where the physical properties of the knots, their color, type, or position, somehow represent the sounds or phonetics of the Quechua language. Perhaps a specific color represents the first letter of a word, or a certain knot pattern corresponds to a syllable. Researchers have tried this, even attempting to use the names of local Inka villages to find phonetic correlations in surviving Khipus from those areas. But the data is frustratingly sparse, and the connections found have been too weak to form a definitive, universally accepted phonetic key. The Khipus system is just so structurally different from any written script we know of, making a direct linguistic analogy a nearly impossible puzzle to solve. The world's leading effort to crack this code is the Khipus database project at Harvard University, pioneered by Dr. Gary Urton. His team has meticulously catalogued and analyzed the properties of over 800 surviving Khipus, housed in museums and collections around the globe. They've documented every knot, every color, every twist. Urton even proposed a sophisticated theory that the Khipus might function as a form of binary code. He suggested that the direction of the fiber twist, the Z twist versus the S twist, along with other variables, could create up to 256 distinct units of information, similar to a modern computer's binary system. However, while the database has provided an unparalleled wealth of structural data, the narrative meaning, what the knots are actually saying, remains elusive. The sheer volume of untranslated data is the mountain we have yet to climb. Now consider this. Khipus were portable data storage devices. They were carried by relay runners called chasquis, who sprinted along the vast and rugged Inka road network, delivering messages across the empire. For this system to work, these runners had to be able to reliably convey the information. The simplicity of the numerical Khipus suggests that any trained official could likely read them and understand an inventory count. But the sheer complexity of the narrative Khipus suggests they required the specialized knowledge of the master Quipuka Myox. This presents a paradox. If a Khipus was truly a portable written document, its meaning had to be universal and readable by the recipient. The fact that the ability to read them was lost so quickly suggests a heavy reliance on oral tradition to supplement the knotted structure. It's possible the Khipus was a mnemonic device, a guide for a story told aloud, making it a hybrid system that is now impossible for us to fully reconstruct without that lost oral component. If we could unlock them, what stories would these knots tell? The solved numerical Khipus have already confirmed the Inca's sophisticated administrative prowess, but the unsolved narrative Khipus potentially holds so much more. They could contain the royal genealogies, detailing the names and epic deeds of the great Inca emperors, the Sapa Inca. They might hold the Inca's creation myths and histories, their own version of the Greek epics. They could contain the imperial laws, the statutes, treaties, and legal decisions that governed their vast and diverse empire. We know these records existed. The Spanish chroniclers tell us so. But today they remain locked within the knots. The silence of the Khipus represents the largest single narrative gap in the history of the Western Hemisphere, a whole civilization story waiting to be read. There has only ever been one artifact that offered a genuine Rosetta Stone moment. It was called the Orongo Khipus, discovered back in 2005. It was a Khipus found alongside a Spanish colonial document that appeared to transcribe the census data recorded in the knots. This provided a partial key, confirming beyond a doubt the accuracy of the numerical system. It was a fantastic discovery, linking names and numbers on a page to knots on a string. However, it did not yield the breakthrough everyone was hoping for. It didn't provide a phonetic or narrative key. While it proved the numbers were correct, the method for encoding and retrieving non-numerical information, the stories, the laws, the history, remains entirely unsolved. The Inka Khipus stand as one of the most unique and elegant forms of data storage ever devised. They are a three-dimensional archive of a lost empire, a system that successfully governed millions of people across a massive territory without a single pen stroke. But because of the deliberate persecution of the knot keepers, coupled with the inherent complexity of translating a tactile hybrid system into a modern phonetic language, the greatest library of the New World remains completely sealed. The entire history of the Inca Empire is, quite literally, hanging by a thread. Our final journey into the unexplained takes us to a time long before the pyramids, even before Stonehenge, deep into the western desert of Egypt. Here, near the Sudanese border, lies the ghost of a vast freshwater lake. Around 11,000 years ago, nomadic cattle-herding people gathered on its shores and created something astonishing: Nabta Playa. It's a sprawling complex of stone monuments, calendars, and mysterious structures, now recognized as the world's oldest known astronomical site. We know the site is real and the alignments are precise, but what it was all for remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in human history. The most famous feature at Nabta Playa is a small circular arrangement of megaliths. Dated to around 5000 BC, it's a full 1,000 years older than Stonehenge. Archaeologists, led by the renowned Dr. Fred Wendorf, discovered that these stones weren't placed randomly. They were intentionally set up to align with the summer solstice. A specific line of megaliths and smaller stones points exactly to the spot on the northern horizon where the sun would rise on that longest day of the year. This is proof positive that these early Neolithic people had a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos and the mathematical skill to build a calendar based on the sun's movements. But here's where it gets strange. If this was a calendar, what was it for? The people of Nabta Playa were nomadic herders who only came to this area during the brief summer rainy season when the lake filled with water. This wasn't a daily calendar for farming. It was a seasonal marker. The leading theory is that it was used to predict the arrival of the monsoon rains, which was absolutely critical for their cattle's survival and, by extension, their own. The calendar's function was to anticipate the return of life-giving water, but the exact rituals they performed to ensure that prediction held true are completely lost to time. Beyond the stone circle, the mystery deepens. The site is covered with dozens of other megalithic structures. This includes 5 sets of long straight lines of massive stones that stretch for hundreds of meters across the desert floor. These lines appear to be deliberately aligned with the 4 cardinal directions. What's even more mind-blowing is that the placement of some of these stones seems to mimic the star patterns of Orion's Belt and Ursa Major. If this is intentional, and most scholars believe it is, it means these ancient desert nomads were mapping the heavens onto the earth with a precision we thought only came much later, with massive civilizations. The ritual purpose for this incredible celestial map is entirely unsolved. Perhaps the most perplexing puzzle at Nabta Playa is the discovery of a cattle cemetery. Buried under huge stone mounds, archaeologists found the complete skeletons of young cattle. They weren't just tossed in a pit. They were buried with meticulous care, draped in what appear to be ceremonial shrouds. This points to ritual sacrifice and a profound reverence for cattle, a practice that predates the famous sacred Apis bull of the pharaohs by thousands of years. This confirms a highly developed cattle cult, likely centered on fertility and life. But why they were sacrificed and what the accompanying rituals looked like remains a complete enigma. And then things get even more profound. Beneath one of the largest stone mounds, a single human burial was found. The remains belonged to a woman, buried in a flexed position. The sheer scale of her tomb suggests she was a person of incredibly high status. Accompanying her was the skeleton of a young bull, also ritually sacrificed. The combination of a monumental stone tomb, an important person, and a sacrificed bull points to the very beginnings of a royal or divine lineage, a centralized authority thousands of years before the pharaohs even existed. Was she a queen, a priestess, a shaman? Her identity and her role in this ancient religion are entirely unknown. Nabta Playa completely flips the script on ancient history. It shows that large-scale stone construction and sophisticated astronomy didn't begin in the fertile Nile Valley, but out here, in the deep desert. It suggests that the monumental building tradition that would eventually lead to the pyramids might have been imported to the Nile by these nomadic desert cultures. As the climate dried up, they were forced to migrate east. This idea challenges the traditional Nile-centric view of Egyptian civilization, hinting at a desert origin for some of its most fundamental religious and astronomical concepts. How and when this cultural knowledge was transferred is a puzzle we have yet to solve. The entire story of Nabta Playa is tied to climate change. The area was only habitable during a short window known as the African Humid Period. But by 4500 BC, the rains failed for good. The Sahara began its relentless expansion, forcing the population to flee toward the permanent waters of the Nile. It's possible that the elaborate rituals and astronomical knowledge we see preserved in stone were their final desperate attempts to appease the sky and bring back the life-giving rains. The great unsolved question is this: did the knowledge from Nabta Playa help spark the unification of Egypt, or was it just one of many traditions that were absorbed into the rising Nile civilization? The sheer sophistication of Nabta Playa, with its precise star alignments and ritual animal burials, reveals the immense cultural and intellectual complexity of these supposedly simple pre-agricultural nomads. This level of organization and ritual points to a highly structured society that valued knowledge, the cosmos, and honoring their ancestors. The ability to coordinate the construction of these sites year after year during brief seasonal visits is a monumental feat that shatters our modern image of what early nomadic life was like. Nabta Playa is where the first light of astronomical science and monumental ritual truly dawned. It proves that humanity was organizing the cosmos and building calendars thousands of years earlier than conventional history would have us believe. We know the stones align with the stars, and we know they were used to predict the return of the life-giving rains. But the exact rituals they performed, the identity of their leaders, and the true legacy of the knowledge they carried from the drying desert to the fertile Nile remain entirely, monumentally, Unsolved. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey back in time. If you found this mystery as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. We'll see you in the next one.